Chapter 412. Gong Jiu's inspection naturally wasn't that simple. The soup was soup, but the chicken and all the other ingredients had to be separated one by one. Gong Jiu then divided the soup into 3 portions, and all the other ingredients were also divided into 3 portions. The chicken was even more fragmented. In Gong Jiu's hands, the bones were bones, and the meat was meat. Gong Jiu used several methods to inspect it, but there was nothing wrong with it. Even so, Gong Jiu didn't jump to conclusions. The results of the inspection didn't mean that there was nothing wrong with it. Perhaps he just didn't find anything wrong with it. In this aspect, it showed Gong Jiu's cautious attitude. Of course, in Jingwan's opinion, this kind of inspection was still very superficial. At most, it could only determine whether it was harmful or harmless. Using a few special things to inspect it according to the expected direction, she could clearly analyze the ingredients in her previous life. However, Gong Jiu's methods were much better than other people's. There's something wrong with this chicken. I saw it go into the pot. It's impossible for the chicken to be so fragmented in this period of time. Nanny Gong, who was beside Jingwan, suddenly spoke up. When everyone heard this, they all looked at her in unison. Nanny Gong crouched down. When this servant came to the imperial kitchen to prepare the antique soup for Prince and Princess, this servant accidentally saw this chicken being put into the pot. This servant originally thought that one of the imperial concubines was preparing to eat it after the banquet, but it turns out that Her Highness Consort Shu doesn't eat chicken soup that has been simmered for too long. According to the time, even if it had been simmered until now, it should be far more than this. Hearing Nanny Gong's words, the people in the imperial kitchen all nodded. Yes, this chicken should have been raised for almost 2 years. It can't be that fragmented so quickly. Under normal circumstances, most people would overlook this situation. Although Gong Jiu was originally a hidden guard, he had never entered the kitchen. Even if he had carried out missions before, he would only personally roast some game. Basically, it would be eaten before it was cooked, so it was very normal that he didn't know. At this moment, Gong Jiu displayed Eunuch Mu's learning spirit. He decided that when he returned, he would learn more about cooking in order to avoid making similar mistakes in the future. We can't find anything wrong with this chicken. Is there any more chicken in the imperial kitchen? It's best if it's alive. Gong Jiu turned to ask the head steward of the imperial kitchen. Yes, I'll get someone to bring them here right away. The biggest suspect for Qin Shu Fei being poisoned was the imperial kitchen. At this time, they naturally hoped that they could get to the bottom of the matter as soon as possible, because only by doing so would they have a chance to live. If they could live, no one would be willing to die for no reason. Only the 3 stewards had temporary freedom because they had to cooperate with the investigation. The others in the imperial kitchen were detained by the Imperial Bell Army. Cut the crap. Hurry up and go, Lu Qingdi said coldly. The steward trembled and hurriedly left. He asked a few imperial guards to help him catch the remaining chickens in the cages. There were still more than 10 of them. Gong Jiu used needles on each of the chickens and couldn't help but frown. These chickens were normal and looked very spirited. Under normal circumstances, if a living creature was fed with poison that could kill a person, there was no reason for the chickens to be alive. What about the chickens slaughtered in the same column? Are there any abnormalities? Now that he was asking about abnormalities, it was obvious that he was asking if there were any abnormalities. The steward of the imperial kitchen hurriedly sent someone to check. Although a lot of chicken was used and the dishes used were different, the chicken heads and legs were all still there. Other than Qin Shu Fei, no one else wanted to stew a whole chicken. When Lu Qingdi found out that the chickens in the same column were actually served at the banquet, his heart grew colder and colder. He even suspected that he had taken a trip to the gates of hell. Before Gong Jiu could inspect the chicken heads, another steward of the imperial kitchen noticed the problem with a trembling voice. Head steward, this chicken, there's an extra one. Everything that entered the imperial palace had to be checked strictly. There was a limit to everything, and this live chicken was naturally the same. The result was basically certain that the extra one was the one with the problem. Because they were all pulled out of the chicken pen and slaughtered directly, there were a few people in charge of slaughtering the chickens. Moreover, Some imperial chefs disliked the young eunuchs for not handling it well and would do it themselves. As for the one given to Qin Shu Fei, it was slaughtered together with the other chickens. After all, it was cold and it was fine to leave it for a while. As such, unless someone in the imperial kitchen knew that the chicken was different from the other chickens after it was slaughtered. However, there were so many people in the imperial kitchen, including the senior and junior chefs. They dealt with ingredients every day and knew that they couldn't be careless in their work. They were very careful and sharp. If there was a slight difference, for the sake of insurance, regardless of whether there was a problem or not, it would be discarded. In this way, Qin Shu Fei's misfortune was greater. Then who was this chicken targeting? Or was it that no matter who it was, as long as someone fell, their goal would be achieved? Wouldn't it be better if it was Lu Qingdi who fell for it? Or was there a backup plan? The plan now was to find out the origin of the chicken. This matter was not within the scope of Gong Jiu's responsibility. When they were slaughtered, all the chickens were fine. Gong Jiu was still brooding over this point. No, there's only one possibility. That chicken was fed some kind of drug from the beginning. The dosage was very small, far from the extent that would die after 1 or 2 doses. Then, bit by bit, over time, the chicken looked very healthy and alive, but in fact, it had already become a poisonous chicken. Jingwan thought of this possibility based on the drug resistance in her previous life. However, if it was a poison, it should be able to destroy the body faster and die faster. Was there a possibility that it developed a resistance? When Gong Jiu heard this, his eyes suddenly brightened. He clasped his hands in front of Jingwan. Princess Consort is wise. This humble one is enlightened. Gong Jiu's sudden move really caught Jingwan off guard. She subconsciously moved away as she couldn't bear it. Li Hanyuan reached out to stop him in time. Jingwan couldn't avoid it. His wife was thin-skinned. Lu Qingdi also smiled in surprise. Lao Lu, she doesn't need to avoid it. Your Fu's doctor is right. There is nothing you can't bear. Jingwan didn't know how to respond to Lu Qingdi's words. She just lowered her head and pretended to be shy. If Princess Consort's guess is true, then the number of these chickens will not be many. Out of 100 chickens, it would be quite good to feed 1 or 2 intact chickens. What is fed would only be a semi-finished poison. For the finished poison, even if it was just a little bit at the tip of a needle, it would be impossible for the chicken to survive. According to Shu Fei Nyang situation, she was poisoned today. To be more precise, it was tonight. It's just that we don't know if the other half of the poison came from food or something else. Gong Jiu said, in other words, there will be no problem if one gets infected with only one of the two. At least it won't be as serious as Shu Fei Nyang's. Jin Qin Wang, who had been acting as the perfect background, finally opened his mouth. Yes, only one half. After 2 Shurchen, there won't be a problem if you get infected with the other half. It's not easy to raise poisonous chickens. It took 1 or 2 years of careful planning, and it was also successfully brought into the palace. Naturally, it wouldn't be wasted. If it was targeted at a certain person, there should be a flaw. If it was just to create trouble, it's uncertain if the poisonous chicken would enter a certain person's mouth. To achieve the goal, the other half of the poison is bound to be cast widely. The possibility of it being food is much higher than a certain item. When Li Hanyuan said this, Lu Qingdi's blood became half cold again. He even felt that he was a little uncomfortable and wondered if he was also poisoned. The latter is more difficult to investigate. The former is less feasible, but it's not absolutely impossible. In Ben Wang's opinion, the former is more likely. Regardless of whether Shu Fei Nyang was the targeted person or not, she was poisoned, so she must have come into contact with the other half of the poison. After all, the palace maids had tasted the things that Shu Fei Nyang ate in advance. Something happened to her, but the palace maids were fine. Either the other half of the poison did not come from food, or there is a problem with the palace maids. In addition, it's just to create trouble. It's basically useless against Fu Huang, the imperial concubines, and the princes. From Shu Fei Nyang's reaction, it's a strong poison. The effect will be seen after eating it. In this way, the ones who are more likely to be poisoned are the court officials and the envoys of other countries. What's the purpose of creating trouble? The envoys of other countries. If there's no personal family interest involved, who would take such a big risk? Unless there are spies of the empire hiding in the palace. And deliberately plotting to murder the court officials at the palace banquet is even more unreasonable. It's easier to operate outside the palace than in the palace. Li Honyuan said so much. It seemed like there were many possibilities, but in reality, some of them had prerequisites. As long as one of them was clear, the other possibilities could be eliminated. Xu Fei Nyang-Yang's tasting maid has been interrogated. She was originally sent into the palace by the Marquis of Champion's residence. When she first entered the palace, she was 11 years old. Her relatives are all in the Marquis of Champion's residence. She has been in the palace for 5 or 6 years, so it's basically impossible for her to have received special training. The possibility of an ordinary girl lying under torture is very low. Therefore, there shouldn't be a problem. Yu Zhongqing said. Regardless of whether there's a problem or not, lock up all the people who should be locked up. Directly investigate the things that Xu Fei Nyang came into contact with tonight. Push back the time of the poisoning to 2 hours. If we can find the source of the other half of the poison, we don't have to do anything else. Li Hongyuan's face was clearly impatient. Originally, there were still activities after the banquet, which would last until midnight. There was no court meeting tomorrow, and the courtiers only needed to go to the yamen in the afternoon. The liveliness after the banquet was comparable to a few major festivals of the year. It should be filled with laughter under the brilliant lights, but it happened like this. The good mood was gone, and those who lacked interest were even more impatient. Lu Qingdi also knew that his son's patience was already at its limit. In reality, Lu Qingdi was also disgusted by tonight's events. More importantly, the fear of his life being threatened by an invisible threat. Although it didn't show on his face, in reality, he was more afraid of death than anyone else. He might as well go all the way and let the blackguard get involved in this matter. The blackguard getting involved in the palace wasn't a good thing. When the courtiers found out, Li Suyin had already brought people to intervene. Therefore, the courtiers simply shut up. The empress was still in Qinshan Hall. Jingwan and Li Honyuan naturally returned. Until now, they still didn't understand why Lu Qingdi wanted them to go to Sweet Dew Palace. Was it just to let them rest? And Prince Gongqin, who followed under the pretense of worrying about Qin Shufei, was the one who really played the role of a background character. At first, he was worried that Lu Qingdi would punish him. In the end, Lu Qingdi didn't even look at him from the beginning to the end. Comparing the two, which situation left him with a bigger psychological shadow compared to the others who were either uneasy, worried, or afraid. Li Honyuan was particularly eye-catching. Xiao Jiao continued to drink and eat, as if she wasn't worried at all that she would follow in Qin Shufei's footsteps. In Jingwan's eyes, she felt that he was a little cold-blooded and cold-hearted. Even if he didn't have any feelings for Qin Shufei, he was still on your side. Was this really okay? Of course, Jingwan wouldn't have a problem with him because of this. If I was poisoned, what would Prince do? Li Hongyuan's wine was just about to reach his mouth. Hearing this, his hand paused. He looked at Jingwan and smiled faintly. Wan, don't say such things. People will die. Smile. It was still the smile that Jingwan was familiar with. However, Jingwan felt an unprecedented coldness. That kind of coldness that could freeze people from their flesh to their soul. That kind of fear made Jingwan feel as if she saw a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood behind him. This seemed to be the real living king of hell. Wan, are you afraid of me? Li Honyuan was still smiling, but that smile was even more terrifying. Jingwan woke up with a start. She met Li Hongyuan's deep and bottomless eyes. She reached out and held Li Hongyuan's hand. I'm not afraid of you. I just don't like the feeling that you give people at Yuan. Li Hongyuan's smile didn't diminish, but that terrifying feeling disappeared. His eyes were dyed with real and touchable warmth. No matter what, this husband will never hurt you. However, Wan, there are some words that you shouldn't say in the future. This husband doesn't like to hear them. It will make me unhappy. If I'm unhappy, I don't know what I will do. Do you understand? Kill people? Jingwan inexplicably didn't avoid this question. Oh, yes, and definitely not just 1 or 2 people. That kind of scene, Wan would never want to see. Jingwan quietly looked at him for a moment, and then opened her mouth. Killing one is a sin. Killing 10,000 is a hero. Killing 9 million is a hero among heroes. Heroes among heroes, the path is different. Seeing through the benevolence and righteousness of the past 100 years and making a hero in this life. I don't love the good name. I don't love the bad name. I don't punish the heart for killing 1,000,000. I'd rather make the foreign race gnash their teeth in hatred. I don't teach no one to scold me. Li Honyuan was slightly surprised. His wife's words were quite bold. However, Wan, you're secretly changing the concept. Your husband, I am not that righteous. Perhaps he was a little bit in his previous life, but in this life he was so narrow-minded that he only held up the sky for the people he cared about the most. No, I'm just telling Ayuan my attitude. Because it's you, I can accept it. Of course, she couldn't cross the bottom line. Choosing between family and lover, unless there was something wrong with her brain, she wouldn't easily make a choice. But anyone who wanted two people to live together peacefully and happily wouldn't be stupid enough to make such a choice. Li Honyuan naturally wouldn't do such a thing. In fact, since Jingwan married Li Honyuan, some of her moral bottom lines were being refreshed day by day, getting lower and lower. If it was before, if Li Honyuan hurt the innocent, Jingwan would definitely not approve. Now, perhaps she still wouldn't approve, but she wouldn't have too many negative emotions. And those who were unfavorable to them, she probably wouldn't be lenient. The two people seemed to be intimate with each other, as if there was no one else around, forming a world of their own, excluding the rest of the people. That scene, how eye-catching. The Gong Prince couldn't get rid of the gloominess in his heart. He abruptly stood up and aggressively strode over to Li Honyuan and the others. Imperial concubine Shu has been poisoned. She's unconscious. Her life or death is unknown. Yet old Six is whispering sweet nothings to his Wang Fei, smiling happily. What are his intentions? As an imperial daughter-in-law, you should be chaste and dignified. But Six sister-in-law is openly laughing and joking with her husband in public. Do you have any sense of shame? I'm afraid that even a lowly woman wouldn't do such a thing. Jingwan's face was ashen. She and her husband might be a little closer, but she still had a sense of propriety. But she was said to be so unbearable for no reason. Even a saint would be angry. The Gong Prince met Jingwan's angry gaze and sneered. What? Li Honyuan threw his cup and stood up, grabbing the Gong Prince by the back of his neck and forcefully pushing him onto the table. The cups and plates on the table were knocked over and fell to the ground, making a series of crackling sounds. Li Honyuan casually picked up a plate and smashed it down on the Gong Prince's head. The rest of the plate in his hand, with a flick of his wrist, brushed past the Gong Prince's neck and firmly stabbed into the table, leaving a line of blood. The Gong Prince cried out in pain, but Li Honyuan stepped on his neck, making him immediately speechless. When Li Honyuan stopped, the Gong Prince also recovered a little. But even so, he became more and more frightened. Forget about saying anything. This series of unforeseen events almost made his soul leave his body. Things happened too quickly, and the people around him didn't even have time to react. They just stood up subconsciously, as if they wanted to stop Li Honyuan. When Li Honyuan really stopped, everyone seemed to be frozen in place, and they hesitated to move forward. Li Hongyuan's face was expressionless. He retracted his foot and landed on the Gong Prince's back. His movements were neither fast nor slow. His bearing was not damaged at all. He turned to look at Jingwan and raised his chin. Jingwan stood up and took 2 steps back. Obviously, she didn't have the slightest intention of stopping Li Honyuan. Li Honyuan lifted his robe and put his other foot on the table. He crouched down and pressed the edge of the broken plate. The sharp edge of the broken plate was close to the Gong Prince's bloody neck. What did you say just now? This prince didn't hear it clearly. Say it again. The Gong Prince raised his head, wanting to avoid the potentially fatal thing. He swallowed his saliva, ignoring the wound on his head and the blood flowing down his eyelids. Sixth brother, fourth brother was wrong, really wrong. It was only because I was worried about Imperial concubine Shu that I was agitated and impulsive that I did something wrong. Please forgive your brother this time. There won't be a next time. I promise." At this moment, the Gong Prince was so regretful that his intestines turned green. He even wanted to slap himself twice. He clearly knew what kind of character Li Hanyuan was. How could he act so impulsively and do such a stupid thing? He thought that with so many civil and military officials present, and so many foreign envoys present, he would restrain himself. Obviously, the Gong Prince still didn't understand. How did he suddenly provoke Li Hanyuan to this extent? Li Hanyuan didn't want to waste any more words with him. He stood up and stepped on the Gong Prince's back, crushing him with his foot as if he wanted to trample him to death. The average person might not be able to do it, but Hai, who had truly experienced Li Hongyuan's strength, felt pain when he saw the Gong Prince like that. So many people didn't dare to step forward, and there were even imperial censors among them. It can only be said that no matter if you have iron teeth and copper teeth, no matter if you have a hard bone, you can only shrink back when you meet the King of Hell. After all, everyone has a weakness, and if there's a weakness, you can't escape from the King of Hell's palm. After all, there was once a court official who provoked the Gene Prince. For a long time, the entire family was in turmoil, and everyone was on the verge of collapse. The King of Hell was ruthless, he was poisonous, and he wasn't stingy. If you provoked him, then there really wasn't the slightest bit of reason. And those court officials who understood the Gene Prince's temperament very well, and were smart enough, were able to get along well with the Gene Prince. As long as you thought about it carefully, you could find that every time the Gene Prince got angry, it was basically someone else who provoked him first, and about his tyrannical behavior among the people. In fact, most of it was just a rumor, there was no evidence, and there was no credibility. The Gong Prince was the same this time. Originally, there was nothing wrong, but he insisted on stroking the tiger's whiskers. Now that things had turned out like this, it was absolutely his own fault. Seeing the Gong Prince's face in pain, blood even flowing out of his mouth, some people finally couldn't sit still. "Prince, where it's possible to let people off, one should." Li Hanyuan swept a glance over, and that person's voice abruptly stopped, and he couldn't say another word. However, if the situation continued to go out of control, there was no guarantee that no one would die. When the Gong Prince fell to the ground, he was a prince who held real power. If he was killed by Li Hanyuan, no matter how much Luqing Emperor doted on him, it would be impossible to let him off lightly again. As a result, some of Li Hongyuan's brothers couldn't wait for Li Hanyuan to really kill the Gong Prince. Not to mention one less strong opponent, Li Hanyuan, this bastard who made them feel humiliated and afraid. Unrelated people might be able to stand by and watch, and they would also be afraid of Li Hongyuan's threat. But what about the people who were closely related to the Gong Prince? The Gongqin princess consort was on the verge of collapse. The Gong Prince was now treating her worse and worse, but they were husband and wife. If the Gong Prince died, she wouldn't have a good life either. However, she couldn't even get close. Gong Mama, standing in front of her for the Gongqin princess consort, it was a divine punishment. Gong Mama regarded Jing Wan as an important person, but she was humiliated by the Gong Prince for no reason. Because she was a servant, she didn't show it on her face, but in her heart, she was exceptionally angry. She restrained herself from doing anything, but the Gong Prince didn't even think of getting half a step closer. The Gong Prince princess shouted, scolded, pushed, but there was nothing she could do. Helpless, she turned to her father for help, but the Left Governor Qin Tianming just looked at her coldly. "How do you want your father to help?" "Not to mention whether or not I can help. Even if I say a word, the one who will suffer will be our family." Wang Feinyang, have you forgotten what happened at the Gong Prince's residence last year? You angered the Gene Prince, but your husband refused to bow his head and admit his wrongs. The ones who suffered were your brothers, and you even asked for your father's forgiveness. How long has it been, and you've already forgotten? He glanced at the Gong Prince. Heaven's evil can be forgiven, but self-inflicted evil can't be escaped. Qin Tianming didn't lower his voice, so everyone around heard him clearly. Obviously, this father-in-law of his believed that the Gong Prince brought this upon himself. The whole court knew that after that incident last year, Qin Tianming and the Gong Prince had become somewhat estranged, but they didn't expect it to be to this extent. It must be said that the Gong Prince's biggest reliance was his father-in-law, but now that he was pushed further and further away, it would be difficult for him to seize the throne. Of course, these were all tacit thoughts, no one would say it out loud. But the Gong Princess only felt a buzzing sound in her head. Another person who was on the verge of collapse was naturally the Gong Prince's biological mother. She stumbled over, but because of her status, she didn't dare to directly pull Li Honyuan, but regardless of her status as a Shu mother, she directly knelt down, tearfully begging Li Honyuan to be lenient. After all, she was Lu Cheng Emperor's concubine. Not everyone dared to accept her kneeling, so the people nearby naturally retreated. Unfortunately, Li Honyuan didn't even spare her a glance. The Prince of Gong's birth mother was particularly helpless, crying her heart out. Ordinarily, she was also an extremely clever person, able to speak eloquently, able to come up with an idea with just a turn of her eyes, but at this moment, her mind seemed to be in a trance. She only knew to kneel and beg, as if there was no other way. Yuan, imperial concubine, Su slowly walked over. But Li Honyuan still acted like he didn't hear. Imperial concubine Su's complexion wasn't very good. If it was before, she would have thought that Li Honyuan didn't hear, but now she wasn't so sure. The Gong Prince's biological mother seemed to be grasping at a life-saving straw. Imperial concubine Yang Yang, Imperial concubine Yang Yang, please save Old Fourth. Save him. He was just confused for a moment. There's absolutely no other meaning. Please save him. Please save him. As long as you can save him once. This concubine is willing to be your ox or horse. Please. Unlike Li Honyuan, she grabbed Imperial concubine Su's sleeve without any psychological barrier. Imperial concubine Su frowned, tugging at her sleeve twice, but couldn't free it. Little sister, what are you saying? You and I are both His Majesty's concubines. We both serve His Majesty. Quickly get up. How could the Gong Prince's biological mother be willing? If Imperial concubine Su didn't help, she would keep kneeling. Imperial concubine Su's complexion naturally became worse. Retreating 2 steps, she forcefully pulled back her sleeve, coldly glancing at her, then looked at Li Honyuan, who was stepping on the table. Yuan, that's enough. It's just a few words. Don't tell me you really want to kill your blood-related brother because of this? Li Honyuan finally reacted, turning his head and looking at Imperial concubine Su. Perhaps because of the position, there was a hint of condescension in his voice. Just a few words. Imperial concubine mother thinks so? Imperial concubine Su's heart unconsciously thumped. Those who didn't know would only think that she wanted to turn big things into small things into nothing. But in fact, she was targeting Jingwan. 2 light words, to some extent, confirmed the Gong Prince's words. Jin Xin Wang Fei was unruly, without decorum, shameless in front of everyone. She was simply throwing away the face of the imperial family. In the end, Imperial concubine Su dared to set traps for Jingwan again and again with words. Only because she felt that Li Hongyuan's temperament was straightforward, he was impatient, he didn't even understand the twists and turns of the inner palace. More importantly, she still subconsciously felt that she, Imperial concubine mother, was the most important person in his heart. Even if there was a gap between mother and son, it wouldn't change this. As long as it didn't involve Prince Rue, then, for other things, this son would still listen to her. Imperial concubine Su didn't answer. She seemed to be thinking about what to say, but Li Honyuan spoke first. In the imperial family, if there really is such a thing as blood brothers, then there wouldn't be so many you and I fighting. I can let him go, but, Imperial concubine mother, this is the last time. Li Honyuan retracted his foot and sent the Gong Prince flying. Imperial concubine Su didn't quite understand what this last time meant, but intuition told her that it definitely wasn't a good thing. After sending the Gong Prince flying, Li Honyuan didn't stop there, his foot hooked, and that antique copper pot was also sent flying. It hit the Gong Prince's back with a dong and then rolled to the ground. The remaining soup in the pot splashed all over the Gong Prince. The ground was also a mess. Fortunately, it hit the back. If it hit the head, maybe he really would have died. That copper pot wasn't light. Of course, in all likelihood, it was the result of Li Hongyuan's deliberate control. The Gong Prince's current appearance was really as embarrassing as it could be. Since birth, he had never encountered such a thing, in front of so many foreign envoys, in front of so many civil and military officials, in front of all his brothers and sisters, in front of all his concubines. It could be said that he had lost all his face. His vision turned black. He didn't know if it was because he was angry or because he was beaten, but then he finally fainted as he wished. Li Hongyuan came down from the table, brushing off his robe that wasn't stained with anything and straightening out his cuffs. His demeanor was still calm and indifferent, completely unaware that he had just done something that could be described as shocking in the eyes of others. Come, prepare another antique soup. How many people sucked in a breath of cold air? After doing such a thing, he could still eat it? There was a faint commotion in the direction of the foreign envoys. Li Hongyuan lightly swept his gaze over. You all, did you enjoy watching the show? In fact, they did enjoy it, but inexplicably no one dared to look at Li Hongyuan. Even the people from Western Han, former Wei, Southern Qi, and other countries were the same. They either immediately ate, looked down at the ground, or turned to talk to others. Only the last situation was a little awkward. There was no tacit understanding between the two. You look at me, I look at him, not face to face. It was incomparably awkward. Even so, they still appear to be particularly focused, indicating that they really weren't watching the show just now. From another point of view, if the people from Qiyuan went to other countries at the birthday banquet, first there was the poisoning of the imperial concubine, and then there was the blatant quarrel between brothers. Wouldn't they be happy? After all, they were enemies. The fiercer the internal conflict, the happier they would be. Perhaps there were no substantial benefits, but they could completely attack the other party mentally and verbally. No matter what, even if they won by half a point, it was still a victory, right? Therefore, the people from Qiyuan could actually understand the current mentality of these envoys. They originally felt that it was exceptionally shameful, but when Jin Xinhuang made a move, the envoys all avoided him and didn't dare to say or do anything. It made them inexplicably feel that even if their side lost face, it was something that others didn't dare to look at. It was as if when a master's family had a conflict, the servants could only pretend that they didn't know anything. That's right, it was this kind of feeling. Many people looked at each other and then looked away without leaving a trace. That's right. It turns out that they weren't the only ones with this idea, and then they calmed down. But this atmosphere didn't last long. The Gong Qinhuang mother and the Gong Qinhuang consort stumbled over to the Gong Qinhuang consort. The Gong Qinhuang consort hesitated, but the Gong Qinhuang mother didn't care about the dirt at all. She picked up the unconscious Gong Qinhuang consort. Someone, call the imperial physician, call the imperial physician. What? The imperial physicians seemed to be all in the Sweet Dew Palace at this time. It was unlikely that they would come over, but was it possible to carry this dirty Gong Qinhuang to the Sweet Dew Palace? After a slight hesitation, they had no choice but to choose the latter. The worst-case scenario was to take off the Gong Qinhuang consort's outer robe. After all, the other places were actually fine. They could just wipe it with a handkerchief. With the Empress's decree, several eunuchs and the Gong Qinhuang consort's personal attendants came forward to help. They didn't know if the Gong Qinhuang mother did it intentionally or unintentionally. But although she took off the Gong Qinhuang consort's outer robe, she didn't carefully wipe off the dirt that splashed on his hair and neck. Li Hongyuan didn't notice, and even if he did, he wouldn't have any reaction. He just wanted to show off to his old man, to put on a good show of bitterness. He'd already beaten him. He'd already injured him. These external things really didn't matter. After the Gong Qinhuang consort was sent away, the palace servants began to tidy up the floor, tidying up the Jin Xinhuang consort seat. When they were almost done, Lu Qingdi appeared. When Lu Qingdi saw Li Hongyuan, he had a helpless expression, rubbing his throbbing temples. You evil creature, why can't you stop? When the Jin Xinhuang consort made a move on the Gong Qinhuang consort, someone obviously went to report to Lu Qingdi, most likely sent by the Empress. It wasn't that the Empress was partial to the Gong Qinhuang consort, but because Li Hongyuan went crazy, ordinary people simply couldn't control him. Although he talked back to Lu Qingdi, making Lu Qingdi stomp his feet in anger, but as a son, he still listened to his old man's words most of the time. When Lu Qingdi came over, he most likely encountered the Gong Qinhuang consort's party. As a mother, one of the imperial consorts must have cried miserably, fiercely adding oil to the fire. Today's events were too many. For Lu Chengdi, it was great joy, great sorrow, great anger, and even the fear of death. His body wasn't very good to begin with, and now it could be said that he was physically and mentally exhausted. No matter what Li Hanyuan did, he didn't want to look into it, or it could be said that he didn't have the energy to look into it. After sitting down, he said, "Old Six, calm down." 5 simple words, and this matter was over. Over like this? The envoys were very surprised. This emperor being so biased. Was there really no problem? There really wasn't a problem. Just get used to it. For the Qiyuan side, it was a bit surprising that Lu Qingdi still didn't do anything, but thinking about Lu Qingdi's current state, one after another they calmed down. It could only be said that the Gongqin Wang consort brought this upon himself, but he was also very unlucky. The former Wei Kingdom's 5th prince's gaze fell on Li Hanyuan for a long time. His mood was a bit complicated. He seemed to admire Li Hanyuan a little. For a prince to be able to do this, it was really amazing, but there was also a bit of envy and jealousy, and something else that couldn't be explained clearly. In the capital of Wei Kingdom, he was also a tyrant, running amok, but in the face of the important ministers of the court, he didn't dare to do anything. In front of his imperial father, he restrained all the edges and corners of his body. He didn't dare to show his surly side. Even if something happened, it was the crown prince who secretly helped him clean it up. He didn't dare to report it to his imperial father. Unlike Li Hanyuan, who was unscrupulous in everything, he wasn't afraid of anything. This person, to be able to live to this extent, even if his life was shortened, it was still not in vain. Gui Fei, the banquet is over. The rest of the matters will be arranged by you. Lu Qingdi said after drinking a few mouthfuls of water. Yes, your majesty. Gui Fei Su originally wanted to talk to Li Hanyuan, but now it looked like she couldn't. Fortunately, the imperial garden was already prepared, so she didn't need to work too hard. Even though the phoenix eel was in Qin Shu Fei's hands and imperial concubine Su was assisting her, Qin Shu Fei was never one to monopolize power. The birthday celebration, this time, was part of the palace's affairs. She had discussed everything with imperial concubine Su before deciding. Thus, imperial concubine Su knew everything and would not mess up. Other than so many things, it was actually time to disperse. After all, most people were not in the mood. However, Qin Shu Fei's situation was still unclear. Once the palace gates were opened, if people with ulterior motives were allowed to leave the palace, or if people were allowed to take some important things out of the palace, it would be even more troublesome to investigate. https:///11/118007/8189880. Chapter 413. The snow in the Imperial Garden had been cleared. Although it was winter, it was not bleak. All kinds of lanterns and ornaments were decorated. It looked exceptionally beautiful, and there was even an illusion of being in a fairyland. However, there was a small problem. Oh my God, it was too cold, wasn't it? Jingwan believed that the so-called fairyland was a kind of atmosphere created by everyone's breath. Jingwan was fully armed. Her cloak was pulled up again, and her hood was pulled over her head. She carried an exquisite hand warmer in her arms as she walked side by side with Li Hanyuan. It's late at night, and it's cold. We're fine, but for those who are older, if they have shoulder or back pain, even if they're wearing thick clothes, they'll still feel the cold wind and the knives drilling into their bones. Who knows how uncomfortable it will be? It'll be so comfortable if they could just go home and lie in bed. Yuan, why was Imperial Father born in such a weather? It's fine if it's cold a few times during the new year, but there's also a long life. Because they were surrounded by their own people and the surroundings were spacious, they were not ordinary people. Jingwan's voice was slightly lower than usual, but her ridicule was not polite. Not many times. Li Hanyuan calmly responded. Jingwan was shocked. These words were already disgraceful. Could it be that her husband was preparing to make a move? Li Hanyuan looked at her sideways and reached out to touch her face. It was a little cold after coming out for a while. I won't do anything. I'll never be the one who's anxious. The current situation is chaotic and stable. When some people can't stabilize, they'll naturally go to extremes. The mantis stalks the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. What I want to do is to be the hunter who keeps an eye on the oriole. If it were me, I might be able to keep him alive for a few more years. This he obviously referred to Lu Qingdi, and Li Hongyuan probably didn't really want to save him. At most, he wouldn't kill him. However, by then, even if Lu Qingdi survived, he would only be a retired emperor without his full strength. To be honest, in Jingwan's eyes, the occupation of retired emperor was actually quite miserable. It was even worse than being a puppet emperor. After all, the puppet emperor had never held power and did not know the feeling of overturning the world. As for retired emperors, because they had obtained it before, it was even more painful to lose it. Throughout history, there had been many empress dowagers. There had been many empress dowagers, but there had not been many empress dowagers. As an emperor, unless he was dead, it was basically impossible for him to put down his full strength. Even if the emperor was not in good health, and there was a crown prince or a prince who was in charge of the country, the empress dowager would definitely keep a tight watch behind the scenes. They were afraid that their son would have evil intentions. The slightest disturbance would immediately make them nervous, and they might even make an extremely wrong decision. It was possible for an emperor to be forced to become an empress dowager, but was there anyone who voluntarily abdicated and was willing to do so? As for your grandfather and grandmother, don't worry. I will have people take care of them. There won't be any problems. Jingwan glanced at him. She knew that there was no need for her to worry. Grandmother had already used this to tease her before. In Jingwan's eyes, the atmosphere in this kind of day would not be lively. However, Jingwan still felt that she was too narrow-minded. When they left Thousand Years Hall, everyone knew that Qin Shufei's poison was already under control. Although she was still unconscious, her life was not in danger. As such, it was not unreasonable for them to be a little more relaxed. Although there were not many young men and women who entered the palace with their elders today, there were still quite a number of them. After all, they were still in a lively state, and there was a good atmosphere to set off. Perhaps it was because of the previous nervousness that they felt, but at this moment, it was very lively. Jingwan and the others were still in the outer circle. After all, they had come here with Li Hongyuan leisurely and could be considered as the last group. Sigh, there was no other way. The living king of hell was really too terrifying. There was no benefit to be gained from it. Naturally, no one was willing to walk with them, much less try to worm their way into being friends with them. Those who were originally walking at the same speed as them also hurriedly left for various reasons. Jingwan glanced at a rockery nearby. There were two figures behind it. There was an 80 to 90% chance that they were the Imperial Guards. It seemed that in order to prevent any more accidents, the entire area of activity had been surrounded. There would not be any restrictions on moving around inside, but once they left, they would most likely be interfered with. If something really happened, they would even be closely served and followed closely behind like a tail. Retracting her gaze, she stood at the top of the stone steps and looked down at the people below. Some were chatting, some were laughing, and some were playing. They were in groups of 3 to 5, and there were even groups of up to 10 people. Not to mention being alone, there were even very few people in groups of 2. Yuan, seeing the scene, what do you think? If I wasn't by your side, you would be all alone. Sai, you are a person who has lived for more than 20 years. Why don't you have 1 or 2 close friends? Even if the requirements are lower, not to mention close friends, as long as you can get along well and occasionally drink wine together, you don't even have one. Don't you feel that you are a failure? Jingwan said with a bit of ridicule. But more than that, there was actually a hidden heartache in the depths of her heart. It should be a very painful thing for a person to not have a close confidant since childhood. Li Hongyuan was a little amused. He stroked Jingwan's back. It's those people who are too low level. Your husband is simply unwilling to pay attention to them. Jingwan was speechless. Her heartache lasted for 3 seconds. Was this the kind of IQ that was too high to have any friends? But he didn't seem to show it to the outside world. There were always people who stuck to him. If he added that he was too handsome to have any friends, and he was too violent to have any friends. It seemed to make sense. Wan, don't worry. Your husband is doing very well. In this aspect, he really didn't care much. Whether or not he had any fair-weather friends in his previous life, he had already forgotten. The gap in his memory was a little long, so he didn't have any impression of them. It could only be said that they were completely unimportant. Jingwan could see that he really didn't force himself at all. All right, there was no need to worry. After all, there were some people's worlds that outsiders couldn't understand. In this regard, Jingwan and Li Honyuan really couldn't reach the same frequency. After all, when she was in Qian Prefecture, she had many friends. Although she wasn't particularly close, there were many people who held her arm when she went out to admire flowers. After entering the capital, she also made friends at the fastest speed. They were close friends, better than those in Qian Prefecture. The two of them held hands and walked down the stone stairs unhurriedly. In order to accompany her husband, Jingwan didn't join in on the fun. As for Li Honyuan, at this moment, his selfish nature was displayed to the extreme. His wife naturally had to be by his side at this time. Jingwan saw a flower lantern somewhere and made a soft sound of surprise. She walked forward and reached out to touch the rather childish flower lantern. She smiled and said, "These should be the hands of the little prince and princess." Who knows? Li Honyuan wasn't interested in these things. Jingwan sighed a little helplessly. This person was really... Soon after, they walked around most of the places. It was just that, everywhere they went, it seemed that everyone consciously made way. There was basically no one else within one zhang. One zhang equals 3. 3M. When they met, they would greet each other from one zhang. One zhang equals 3. 3M away. Then, there would be all kinds of natural or unnatural turns. This kind of feeling of being rejected and disliked by everyone. Although, in fact, these people were afraid of the living king of hell. They were afraid that if they said something wrong, the living king of hell would fly into a rage. As the victim, they didn't come out to seek justice. At least in the beginning, Jingwan was indeed a little embarrassed. However, as time passed, Jingwan also calmed down. In any case, she was basically not familiar with these people. Her impression of them was only that she had met them twice. Basically, they were on the level of matching names. There was nothing more. Then, regarding these people, perhaps they were deliberately united to create a sign of joint resistance against Jin Qinhuang. If someone didn't care, she naturally didn't need to care. Then, finally, someone had the guts to block the road. Jingwan originally thought that not everyone was wallowing in the mire, but after seeing who it was, Jingwan found that she was still too naive. It turned out that it was noble consort Su who sent someone to find Li Honyuan. Wang Nyang is now free and invites you to have a chat. That eunuch was respectful and even had a bit of fear and trepidation. When you're free, you come find Ben Wang. When you're not free, then have you forgotten Ben Wang beyond the 9 heavens? It wasn't a question, but a simple statement of a fact. That was all. This was in Li Hongyuan's eyes. In other people's ears, it was completely not the case. It was more like deliberately finding fault in a fit of pique. That eunuch's forehead was also faintly covered in sweat. Noble consort Su definitely didn't mean it like that. Under normal circumstances, there was nothing wrong with his words. The problem was that Li Honyuan had found a loophole. If these words were to reach noble consort Su's ears, he might be skinned alive. Wang, it's all this servant's fault. This servant didn't think before speaking. Pa. This servant fiercely slapped his mouth a few times. Don't misunderstand noble consort. Noble consort Su loves Wang the most. Li Hongyuan's expression was indifferent, and he didn't comment. His relationship with noble consort Su was getting worse and worse, and he wasn't in the mood to protect her. Noble consort Su had always believed that their relationship as mother and son was deep, and even if there was a gap, it wouldn't become a grudge. She was originally such a shrewd woman who could see through everything, but on this point, she seemed to have been blinded. She believed that at most, he was angry and jealous because of Li Hongming, and that there wouldn't be any problems with their 20 years of relationship as mother and son. Speaking of which, this kind of self-confidence was also self-righteous. However, she insisted on coming to his door again and again, so she deserved to be angered by him. Li Honyuan indicated that his temper this time was quite long. Seeing that Li Honyuan seemed to be indifferent, that eunuch became more and more anxious. If he couldn't invite this master over, noble consort Su would definitely not let him off. Occupying the commanding position, Li Honyuan looked at these people jumping around in front of him as if he was watching a play. When he was happy, he would just watch for fun. When he was unhappy, at worst, he would just teach them a lesson. There was no other way. Some people were born to be wretched and deserved a beating. Why aren't you leading the way? Just as the eunuch was anxiously running around in circles, Li Honyuan finally opened his mouth mercifully. Being treated so rudely, the eunuch felt relieved. He didn't dare to have any negative feelings towards Li Honyuan and was deeply grateful. Li Honyuan naturally reached out his hand to block Jingwan's back. His meaning couldn't be more obvious. Jingwan tilted her head and glanced at him. Noble consort Su was only looking for him, not her. This eunuch also expressed himself very clearly. It was impossible for him not to understand. Therefore, it was 100% intentional. This man was really dedicated to finding fault today. He provoked one person after another. It was as if he wouldn't stop until everyone's blood pressure rose. It felt very childish. Li Honyuan slightly raised his eyebrows. He was just too bored. Even if his wife was by his side, he couldn't be too close. He was unhappy, so naturally, he had to find other ways to make up for it. The eunuch naturally didn't notice the exchange of glances between the two. He lowered his head in fear. Prince, then, if you have something to say, just say it. What are you hemming and hawing for? Li Hongyuan's voice lowered a bit, making people feel their skin tremble. Prince, noble consort Su only invited you. He could only bite the bullet and quickly finish speaking. Then, he closed his eyes and waited for death. Heh. Li Hongyuan chuckled, ridiculing and sinister. Prince, he complained incessantly in his heart. His legs went soft, and he almost knelt on the ground. Jingwan reached out to pat Li Hongyuan's arm. In the end, he's just passing on a message to Mu Fei. Don't make it hard for him. No one has it easy. You go, I'll go find grandmother and the others to talk. Even though I've seen them a few times today, I haven't been able to have a good chat. At this moment, the eunuch really felt that Jin Xinwang Fei was the best person in the world. She was gentle and considerate. She was also kind to the servants. Her words really hit the bottom of his heart. If their master was happy, they might not benefit from it. If their master was unhappy, they might become a punching bag. If their master was not happy, they might become a punching bag. If their master was not happy, they might become the punching bag. If they were capable, it would be fine. If they were not, there would be a layer of servants above them. Those people were even more arrogant than their master. They would oppress those of lower status to show that they were also people above others. Apart from this, sometimes even passing a message would bring about unexpected disaster. Being scolded and beaten was still a light punishment. There was even the possibility of losing their lives. And if they died, then so be it. It would be good if they could get a broken mat. Only you are kind and soft-hearted to even consider such things for them. Everyone can't choose their birth, but everyone is born and raised by their parents. All right, don't say so much. Quickly go and see Mu Fei. There might be something important. Don't let her wait too long. Jingwan comforted gently. Li Honyuan snorted. He seemed to be very disdainful of Jingwan's words, but he didn't say anything else. His attitude and expression unconsciously softened. That eunuch was secretly shocked. He seemed to have discovered something incredible. Li Honyuan and Jingwan went their separate ways. Li Honyuan had someone to lead the way. Jingwan was different. At this time, she didn't know where the Luo family was. Today, only Nanny Gong and Bai Xiao followed Jingwan into the palace. During the banquet, Bai Xiao didn't even enter the hall. At this time, she was outside. There were many envoys who did not know etiquette. Naturally, Jingwan couldn't relax around her. Therefore, without so many people, she naturally couldn't know where the Luo family was at the first moment. Of course, this was not difficult. There were many palace maids and eunuchs serving by the side. She could ask any one of them, and it wouldn't take long for her to know the answer. Jingwan found a place and waited while studying the riddles on the lanterns. Jean Princess Consort, someone called out softly, but the voice was a little tactful. It seemed to have been slowly spat out from the tip of the tongue. It was tainted with a touch of ambiguity and was exceptionally sticky. Hearing the voice, Jingwan couldn't help but tremble. In an instant, goosebumps appeared all over her body. She turned around and saw the unexpected guest a few steps away. She couldn't help but curse in her heart. She had seen Wei Xianfei at the banquet at the beginning. After that, they didn't seem to have any interactions. This princess of the former Wei dynasty had very unique eyes. Was her voice or the way she spoke also unique? Jingwan wanted to say that many men wouldn't like this way of speaking. Of course, if they liked this way of speaking, they would feel their bones would be melted. "Greetings, Your Highness." Jingwan bent down and didn't wait for Wei Xianfei to call her up. In the face of her former love rival, Jingwan smiled. Wei Xianfei's expression was distorted for a moment. In the face of Jingwan's rudeness, the palace maids beside Wei Xianfei didn't dare to say a word. They were outsiders and came from Qi Yuan's #1 enemy country. Their own princess ascending the throne was also quite disgraceful. Now that the eldest prince and the others were still here, they might reluctantly give them some face. But what if they left? Therefore, they absolutely couldn't offend people now, especially after seeing Jin Qinhuang's cruelty. If they offended his Wang Fei, their own princess might be directly killed. According to Lu Chang Emperor's love for Jin Qinhuang, their own princess's death might not even cause a splash. And with just them, they probably couldn't even send the news back to the Wei. Therefore, the best way to behave was to tuck one's tail between one's legs. Just like in the Wei, scolding people who were disrespectful and rude to the princess, only a fool would do such a thing. Jingwan secretly sighed. Sure enough, no matter how she looked on the surface, it was difficult to calm down in her heart. In addition to power, Jin Qinhuang was definitely 800 streets ahead of his father. If it wasn't for a special purpose, in a situation where the two people didn't know each other well, 10 women would definitely take a fancy to Li Hongyuan. Unfortunately, on this point, Jingwan would never give in. No one could. Jin Qinhuang Fei is in a good mood. It seems that Xianfei Nyang is also in a good mood. Jingwan's smile remained unchanged, gentle and dignified, calm and magnanimous. In her heart, she secretly said that fortunately, things had returned to normal. Wei Xianfei's face was a bit stiff. She didn't have any feelings for Jingwan. Even if she took a fancy to Jin Qinhuang, she didn't care about Jin Qinhuang's Jingfei. However, when she held a banquet, not only did Jingwan not go, she didn't even give an excuse to refuse. Even though Wei Xianfei used this as a pretext to make a fuss, but it was the first time that she was swept away in such a way. It was impossible to say that she wasn't angry. Naturally, she bore a grudge. But other than that, there was nothing else. In the end, the plan couldn't keep up with the changes. She unexpectedly became an elder. She didn't even have a chance to speak a word, and the dream was broken. How could she be reconciled? But she couldn't go to Jin Qinhuang now. Otherwise, she would die a very ugly death. Then, she found Jingwan. In fact, she didn't know what use finding Jingwan would have, nor did she know what to say. However, after seeing Jingwan up close, she knew that she had underestimated this Jin Qinhuang Fei. Even if she really entered Jin Qinhuang Fu as she wished, she wouldn't be as relaxed as she imagined. Jingwan was stared at by her and felt inexplicable, but her face didn't show it at all, with a bit of indifference. This princess of the former Wei has become Xianfei. Jin Qinhuang Fei should be very happy. A young woman next to her said with a smile that was neither light nor heavy. Because Wei Xianfei found Jingwan, and because Jin Qinhuang wasn't present, more and more people gathered around. Moreover, these people were not like Li Hongyuan and Jingwan. They more or less had misgivings, so basically, men and women were separated. The people here were basically all beautiful women. Each and every one of them had a reserved smile, but their hearts were burning with the soul of gossip. Excitement was clearly written in their eyes as they waited to watch a good show. Isn't that so? After all, Jin Wang Fei is the #1 in the capital. Jealous woman. Even if some things change later on, some people still stubbornly put the title of jealous woman on Jing Wan's head. The more a woman was angered by a concubine in her own house, the more she was like this. When she spoke to others, there wasn't a single fierce word, but every sentence was filled with deep malice. Like a needle hidden in silk floss, every word was filled with thorns. If they didn't live well, they wouldn't want others to live well. Even if they couldn't do anything, they would splash a basin of dirty water and put a black mark on them. In the end, Jingwan was just a woman. Moreover, she looked amiable and good-tempered. The people around her became more and more unscrupulous. They laughed and giggled as if they didn't say anything, but the more they tried to cover it up, the more obvious it was. People who didn't know would think that there were a lot of unspeakable secrets hidden inside. Just like Wei Xianfei, her thoughts were a bit crooked. However, if she were to pursue it now, it would be completely meaningless. Jingwan's gaze moved away from Wei Xianfei and swept across the people around her. The smile on her face faded little by little, and the warmth in her eyes disappeared little by little. Those people who were laughing and chatting gradually stopped. The expression on their faces was a bit stiff, and they couldn't help but take 2 steps back. If they didn't pay attention, they would step on the people behind them. After a moment, the corners of Jingwan's mouth rose again. It was as if spring had returned to the earth, and the ice had thawed. Looking gentle and beautiful, she said, "This princess, as a woman, has always been pitiful. I don't easily hurt people with my words, but occasionally I may complain about small things. I don't know if His Highness will find your husband when the time comes." As soon as these words came out, the women were shocked. One by one, their hearts beat wildly. One by one, they retreated and hid, trying to avoid Jingwan's sight for fear that she would remember them. Among the 7, there is one, tongue. If your husband brings disaster because of your mouth, I don't know if he will punish you in the name of tongue. The unfinished words couldn't be more obvious. The smile on Jingwan's face didn't change, but in the eyes of these people, it was simply the most sinister smile of the devil. Don't step back. It's not good to step on people. If you fall, it's even worse. Maybe you will be more seriously injured. Everyone seemed to have been immobilized. Their bodies were particularly stiff. Dead silence. For a moment. Princess. The person in front of Jingwan's line of sight tried to ease the situation. After all, if Jingwan really wanted to do something, she would be the first to bear the brunt. My temper is actually quite good, but our prince likes to follow his lead. I can't disobey him, can I? Jingwan was gentle, but these people were scared out of their wits. They really wanted to slap themselves twice. Who told you to talk so much? The palace maid who went to look for the Luo family didn't know what was going on inside. She could only respectfully ask these noble women to move aside. With someone coming to save the scene, these people were naturally happy and quickly moved aside. The scene was like welcoming a big shot. Instead, the palace maid was so scared that she didn't dare to go in. Jingwan was in the most central position. She glanced over. "Have you figured it out?" The palace maid hurriedly squatted, replying to Princess, "It's clear. Lord Luo and Madame Luo are both in Linhui Pavilion." Jingwan nodded. As expected, Imperial Concubine Su and Imperial Concubine Qin arranged it together. It was impossible that they did not consider those elderly people. If a large group of people fell ill because of Lu Qingdi's birthday, that would be extremely unlucky. It was simply cursing Lu Qingdi. The Pavilion of Resurrection was a pavilion in the Imperial Garden. Compared to the various halls, it was much smaller in scale. However, it was much larger than the pavilions in the courtyard. It was built with pavilions and terraces. To put it bluntly, it was a place for people to rest when they were tired of walking in the Imperial Garden. Afterwards, they could enjoy the scenery while they were at it. There was more than one place like this. This kind of loft actually didn't have the function of keeping warm. However, if the layers of curtains were all put down and only some special places were left to be hung to ensure ventilation and a brazier was lit, it was definitely much better than being outside. Jingwan pulled down her hood and held onto the hand warmer. "I won't disturb Xian Fei Nyang Yang's mood. I'll take my leave first." Following the principle of getting out of the way, she left unhurriedly, threatening a large group of people and then leaving as if nothing had happened. The impression that Jingwan left on these people this time was enough to completely subvert her previous image. The people left behind were still trembling. They weren't sure if Jinxin Wang Fei was joking or if she would really do it. But there was one thing that they were 100% sure of. If Jinxin Wang really came knocking on their door, the possibility of them being divorced was very high. In the entire capital, there weren't many who dared to be unyielding and contend with Jinxin Wang. No matter what, after this, these people would at least restrain their mouths a lot and wouldn't dare to rashly act up again. Lin Lu was still a little far from where Jingwan was now. Along the winding corridor, it went all the way to the other side, halfway up the mountain. Jingwan wasn't in a hurry. On the other side, Li Hongyuan had already seen noble consort Su and gave a perfunctory greeting. However, Li Hongyuan was used to doing this, so noble consort Su didn't feel that there was a problem at all. Subsequently, noble consort Su subconsciously wanted to reach out and pull Li Hongyuan's arm, but Li Hongyuan avoided her. The expression on noble consort Su's face stiffened for a moment, then she sighed sadly. Yuaner is really estranged from Mu Fei. Mu Fei called for a Ken. What matter did Mu Fei have? Li Hongyuan asked with an indifferent expression. As for the sadness on noble consort Su's face, he acted as if he didn't see it and was indifferent. If it was in the past, he might have comforted noble consort Su with a few words, but now, sorry, he already didn't have that interest. As for what noble consort Su would think of his reaction, Li Hongyuan also didn't have the interest to understand. Noble consort Su was really a loss. Looking at Li Hongyuan, the uneasiness on her face increased as the lecture progressed. Finally, she seemed to have no choice but to open her mouth with some caution. Does Yuaner think that you are angry with Mu Fei because of the previous matter? But Yuaner, today is your Fu Wang's birthday after all. After all, he is your blood-related brother. It doesn't matter how you argue in private, but with so many people, if the brothers don't get along, your Fu Wang will definitely lose face. Moreover, if something really happens, your Fu Wang will definitely not. Mu Fei, Li Hongyuan's patience ran out, and his expression became colder. In your eyes, Aken is just a child who will never grow up. What you say is what? Aken has always taken revenge for enmity and resentment. Today's matter won't be left for tomorrow. Like this, in your eyes, Aken is straightforward and doesn't know how to beat around the bush. Do you also think that Aken completely doesn't understand your twisted words? Noble consort Su was at a loss. Yuaner, what do you mean? What do I mean? Li Hongyuan's face was full of disappointment. Those brothers who are only half blood related. If you are angry with Mu Fei because of them, Mu Fei should think about it. Can our mother-son relationship still be maintained until today? Even now, Mu Fei still wants to pretend to be confused and fool Aken? Then Aken might as well tell Mu Fei directly, Luo Shi is also the daughter-in-law that you have longed for 6 years. Urchin's previous fiancés all met with mishaps, yet she married into Jinxin Wang Fu and did her best for Ken. Based on this point, shouldn't Mu Fei treat her a little better? Without her, can Mu Fei find a second woman who is not subdued by Ken? Even if this point is removed, Luo Shi did not do anything wrong. Why are you always targeting her? Always hiding needles in your words and setting traps everywhere. Aken thought that Mu Fei should have understood Urchin's meaning at the welcoming banquet of the former Wei and Chang kingdoms. Unfortunately, you didn't. Luo Shi and I are one as husband and wife. Her honor and disgrace are closely linked to Ken. When Mu Fei targets her, are you sure you can completely cast me aside? You are recognized as the best mother-in-law in the entire inner palace. You can treat Third Saw as your own, but why do you dislike Luo Shi so much? Aken doesn't ask for much and doesn't need you to treat her well. It's enough as long as you don't target her. Can't you even do this? Noble consort Su's lips trembled. She didn't know if it was because her son saw through her unbearable and was at a loss, or because she was angry because her son helped his wife in every way. Mu Fei, although Aken was not born by you, Aken was raised by you. Aken knows all your efforts. As the saying goes, the grace of raising is greater than the grace of giving birth. Aken will never forget your good deeds. Aken doesn't care what kind of person you are, what kind of temperament you have, because you are Mufei. In the past, no matter what happened, I didn't care about it. It wasn't that I didn't understand or didn't know, but because it had nothing to do with me. It was also because you are Mufei. Now, Mufei's actions make Aken bitterly disappointed. Aken doesn't know why you are like this. Is it because Imperial Father is getting older and older? In your eyes, even I have become an obstacle to Third Imperial Brother. So you don't like Luo Shi in every way. Actually, you don't target Luo Shi, but Aken, right? Of course not. You honor. How can you think like that? How can you? Noble consort Su was abnormally agitated. She was about to collapse after being misunderstood by her son. She completely threw away the part about Jingwan. Then Mufei, tell me, what is your reason for targeting Luo Shi? Don't say that you don't have any. Noble consort Su opened and closed her mouth, but she couldn't say anything. She knew that this son was actually very smart, but she didn't expect him to see through her so clearly. However, this son had never seen how she treated Lu Shi. In fact, it was also her. Every time this son was present, he wouldn't say anything about Lu Shi. Now, if she told him that she treated her two daughters-in-law the same, would he believe her? Also, because Lu Shi was obedient and Luo Shi was disobedient, she targeted Luo Shi regardless of the occasion. Could she tell him that? Mufei, you have nothing to say? In order to prevent the last bit of affection between mother and son from being erased, this son will do his best to enter the palace less in the future. This son will take his leave. Li Hanyuan turned and left rather straightforwardly. You honor, stop. Come back. Listen to Mufei, it's not like that. It's really not. Unfortunately, noble consort Su chased after him, but Li Hanyuan remained indifferent. The people around noble consort Su didn't dare to stop him at all, even when noble consort Su tripped and fell to the ground, causing the palace maids and eunuchs to cry out in alarm. Li Hanyuan only paused for a moment and still left without looking back. Such a commotion naturally attracted the attention of the people nearby, but they didn't know the details for the time being. After all, this wasn't noble consort Su's Jade Essence Palace. On the other side, Jingwan found Luo Peishan and old Madame Luo. Luo Peishan, this dignified first-rank official, didn't care about court matters with other colleagues, but accompanied his wife to eat melon seeds and chat about daily life. This made those noble women who wanted to find old Madame Luo feel embarrassed to come forward. It was really enough. Who doesn't know that Jin Wang is very clingy to his wife? Why did he let you out now? Luo Peishan teased. So, grandfather is learning from Wang Ye and clinging to Zumo? Jingwan impolitely retorted. Cough, cough, cough. Luo Peishan obviously didn't expect Jingwan to say this. He choked and coughed violently. Old Madame Luo hurriedly patted his back and looked at Jingwan reproachfully. You, this girl, are really becoming more and more outrageous. Jingwan also knew that she was wrong and hurriedly poured water to apologize. Luo Peishan slowly recovered and bitterly lamented. My good grandson, how long has it been? And Jin Wang has already led him astray. Enough, you also know when to stop. Old Madame Luo reprimanded Luo Darren. Luo Peishan obediently shut his mouth and pouted at Jingwan and old Madame Luo. His meaning was, look, your grandmother is very fierce now. In the whole family, she is the boss. No one dares to say two if she says one. Jingwan laughed. Her laughter was very unrestrained. After the joke, of course, she still asked about Li Hongyuan's whereabouts. After getting the answer, the two elders clearly thought of some of noble consort Su's actions and naturally felt indignant. However, Jin Wang and noble consort Su had a good relationship, which more or less made old Madame Luo mind. When it came to mother-in-law and daughter-in-law issues, as the person caught in the middle, once she sided with one side, the other side would suffer a lot. Grandmother, rest assured, some things are not as simple as they seem on the surface. https 11//11/118007/8222385. HTML. Chapter 414. Jingwan drank some hot tea with the two elders, ate some snacks, and chatted with them at the same time. It was very pleasant. Then, not long after, Li Honyuan appeared. Jingwan was surprised so fast. She thought that she would have to wait until she left the palace to see him. Li Honyuan waved his hand, excusing Luo Darren and Luo Lao Foreign from the ceremony. These two people were also not polite. Ceremony cannot be abolished. Obviously, they would not be so polite to the person who stole their granddaughter. Li Honyuan sat next to Jingwan, directly took Jingwan's teacup, and drank 2 mouthfuls before opening his mouth. Things fell apart. His expression and tone were very indifferent. To be unhappy with the person who raised him for so many years, even if his mood wasn't that bad, at least it shouldn't be as if nothing happened. The two elders of the Luo family looked at each other. So to say, the relationship between Jinqin Wang and Su Gue Fei seemed to be more complicated than they expected. Moreover, it was obvious that Jinqin Wang was in the lead. Not to mention how Su Gue Fei treated Jingwan. This point was very disgusting, but she was after all the person who raised him for more than 20 years. Their impression of her was still somewhat bad. He was able to operate such a large power under the eyes of so many people, yet he could make everyone think that he had no power or influence. He was so scheming, and his skills were as high as the sky, yet he was so heartless. If he wanted to do anything to Wan Wan would definitely be played by him until not even dregs were left. Well, they didn't care about how Li Honyuan was with other people. It didn't matter if Su Gue Fei was killed by him. They were only worried about Jingwan. Li Honyuan saw their expressions but didn't say anything. How he treated Jingwan, he didn't need to use his mouth to tell others. He would only use his actions. Sooner or later, he would let those who truly cared about Jingwan feel absolutely assured about him. Every time Jingwan was mentioned, they would say that she was blessed to have married a good husband. Of course, he wasn't deliberately doing this for others to see. After all, as time passed, outsiders would eventually find out, and it would be easy to guess what they would say. Jingwan's attention was on Li Honyuan. "Can't you get someone to serve you a cup of tea? It only takes a moment." Li Hongyuan's gaze fell on her lips. "What hasn't this prince eaten before? Do you care about this?" Perhaps only the inexperienced young lady would not understand the deeper meaning of these words. It was fine if she messed around in private, but now, in front of the two elders, Jingwan's face immediately turned red. Not to mention now, even in her previous life, it would be quite shameful to say such things in front of the elders. Jingwan flew into a rage out of humiliation. She subconsciously stretched out her leg to kick Li Honyuan. After the kick, she realized that she had done something stupid again. Flirting in front of her grandparents, Jingwan wished she could find a hole to hide in. Out of the corner of her eyes, she secretly glanced at the two elders. They were calmly drinking tea and talking to each other tacitly. It was not a forced topic, it was very natural. Jingwan exhaled and forced herself to calm down. She let the heat on her face fade away as soon as possible. She fiercely glared at Li Honyuan. This bastard, couldn't he care about the occasion? Li Honyuan smiled, but did not speak. His own wife also had times when she would deceive herself. Laugh, laugh, laugh. What's so funny still laughing? Old Madame Luo saw Jingwan's rare embarrassed and angry appearance. She was really becoming more and more delicate. This little temper was also growing. This was something that she had not been able to do for several years. Looking at the obvious half of a footprint on the hem of Jinqin Wang's robes as a wife, her granddaughter was probably the first person to have the guts to kick her own Qin Wang husband. But this granddaughter still did not realize that she had done such a shocking thing. Looking at Jinqin Wang, he had an indifferent appearance. Not only was he not angry, he even had a doting smile on his face. One could see the truth in the details. In private, the two should have no misgivings when interacting with each other. So, perhaps her worries were a bit unnecessary? At least for now, this was indeed the case. she still sighed in her heart. Before Wan was married, no matter how much she was pampered, in reality, because of her old woman's physical condition, Wan was always rational and restrained. She took good care of her grandmother, didn't want others to worry about her, didn't cause trouble for others, and did things that many people who had experienced hardships could not do. Jingwan did not reach her ideal appearance before getting married. It was false that she was not disappointed or regretful. After all, as a married woman, it would only be more difficult, and it was even more impossible for her to show the appearance that a delicate girl should have. But now, it seemed that Wan was the complete opposite. If it was not for her husband's pampering, it was absolutely impossible for her to be like this. Moreover, it was not an ordinary pampering. Only the kind of pampering that allowed her to not worry would be like this. And with Li Hongyuan's identity and status, as long as he was willing, he could completely do this. Obviously, not only was he willing, he also did it. From this point of view, old Madame Luo felt that perhaps she should thank Jin Qinwan. Jingwan retracted her gaze and inadvertently swept across old Madame Luo's line of sight. Her breathing became heavier. She lowered her eyes and obediently pretended to be an ostrich. Jingwan felt that it was shameful, but Li Hongyuan did not care. They were Wan's closest people. He was close to Wan. At most he would say a few words that seemed to be true and false, but he should still be happy in his heart. Therefore, there were some things that he did not have so many scruples about. Li Hongyuan was a person who did as he pleased, but in reality, when it came to Jingwan's matters, he actually cared quite a bit. Therefore, he cared about her as a person. Therefore, he cared about everything about her. Li Hongyuan and old Madame Luo looked at each other, both of them having a tacit understanding. Li Hongyuan chatted with the two elders of the Luo family for a while, waiting for Jingwan to voluntarily reveal her head. Because they were all considerate, Jingwan did not pretend to be an ostrich for long. They did not ask about the matter of Gui Fei Su, but Li Hongyuan took the initiative to bring it up, not for anything else, but because they were wholeheartedly concerned about Jingwan. He reassured their hearts. Therefore, Li Hongyuan's treatment of Gui Fei Su was not heartless. There was a reason for it. There were only 4 of them present, and the servants had all retreated far away. With Li Hongyuan's keen senses, he was sure that there would not be a 5th person who heard it. Although it was not the first time that Jingwan heard Li Hongyuan talk about this matter, but hearing it again, she still felt distressed. At that time, he was only 10 years old. How could Gui Fei Su be so heartless? How could she do it? One could have feelings for a kitten or puppy, let alone a person. Moreover, it was a person who had put in a lot of effort and thought. When Jingwan faced Gui Fei Su, she actually wanted to shake her with all her might to clear her mind and ask her if she had the slightest hesitation when she took action. Although the 2 elders of the Luo family were more restrained, their expressions were also very ugly. In fact, this husband and wife were not people who cared about blind loyalty and filial piety. Therefore, they did not feel that Li Hongyuan's actions towards Gui Fei Su were wrong and should not be done. Thinking about it, if these 2 were the kind of people who would do whatever their parents say, whatever their parents do is right, and whatever their parents do cannot be disobeyed, not to mention that Li Hongyuan would not tell them anything. Even Jingwan would not have a good relationship with them. After getting angry, Luo Peishan narrowed his eyes, revealing a bit of fierce danger. Gui Fei Su targeted Wan for no reason. Do you think this old man is a dead man? Therefore, Luo Peishan, this old fox, did not do anything that was not suitable for him to do. He was angry because of his granddaughter. What were you going to do about it? With Luo Peishan's smooth way of handling things and the help of Ruan Ruiz Hong, the prime minister of the cabinet, no matter how much Li Hongming suffered, he could not find a reason to complain to Lu Qingdi. Some of Gui Fei Su's methods were too smooth and successful. When she targeted Jingwan, she did not think about whether it was appropriate. The biggest difference between Jingwan and Princess Lu was that Jingwan would not be controlled by Gui Fei Su and would not be bound by reputation. Princess Lu would swallow the insult, but Jingwan would never do that. Princess Lu had never resisted. Moreover, Gui Fei Su usually trained her daughter-in-law in private, so others naturally did not know about it. Therefore, when she occasionally said something meaningful, most people would not think too much about it. However, the two elders of the Luo family were not to be trifled with. They loved Jingwan very much. Jingwan was his sweetheart. It was not an exaggeration to say that he loved Jingwan very much. Therefore, if he bullied Jingwan, he expected to get along with her as he trained Princess Lu and even bring her a good reputation. He must be dreaming. Eunuch Mu made a slight noise beside him and then approached. Master, Gue Fei Su's people are here. Gue Fei Su seems to have called for an imperial doctor just now. Li Hanyuan lowered his head to drink tea. Eunuch Mu quietly retreated. Tonight, one by one, the imperial doctors were called. Originally, I thought that this year's birthday, the heavens would be beautiful. Unfortunately, people are not beautiful. This is probably more annoying than the heavens not being beautiful. Not long after, the person who came to see Li Hanyuan went upstairs. It was the same eunuch from before. On such a cold day, he was sweating all over. It could be seen how fast he had come. Greetings to Wang Ye. The greeting went down, but Jin Qin Wang did not call for him to rise. Instead, he waited for a word. Get lost. The eunuch trembled all over, but he did not dare to really get lost. If he did not pass on the message, then Wang Ye, Gue Fei Su, she. With a bang, a teacup bloomed on his forehead. Of course, his forehead also bloomed. Jin Qin Wang did not speak, but the living king of hell directly made his move. If he did not pass on the message, he might suffer when he went back. However, if he continued to speak, he might lose his life now. It was human instinct to choose the lesser of two evils. Therefore, the eunuch covered his forehead and quickly got lost. Jin Qin Wang was currently in a fit of anger. Wasn't it natural that he did not want to hear about Gue Fei Su? If he did not hear anything, he naturally did not need to see Gue Fei Su. Jingwan was quite calm. The two elders of the Luo family were still a little speechless. Therefore, this bad reputation was not without benefits. No one could be so reckless. Wang Ye, Gue Fei Su may not be pretending to be ill to force you to see her again. It is also possible that she is really ill. Is it really going to go? Luo Darren said. So what? Li Hanyuan said as a matter of course. Your current reputation is only worthy of praise for being filial. Others did not dare to say this, but Jingwan was not polite at all. What of what other people think have to do with Ben Wang? As for Fu Huang, if Ben Wang told Fu Huang that Su Shi was worried that Ben Wang would threaten her son and secretly targeted Ben Wang, and even told him that Su Shi was hypocritical and raised Ben Wang only to fight for favor. On the surface, she was doing her best for Ben Wang, but inside, there was not a bit of sincerity. Ben Wang's temperament today is completely useless because of her. At that time, what would Su Shi's end be? Jingwan and the two elders of the Luo family fell silent. Vicious, this move was truly too vicious. Li Hanyuan and Gue Fei Su had lived together in peace for more than 20 years. They were even very close to each other as mother and son. If he said this now, the credibility wouldn't be high. However, Li Hanyuan could completely smooth things over and say that he lost his mother when he was born. Although Gue Fei Su had ulterior motives, she at least treated him well on the surface. He was grateful to Gue Fei Su for raising him and had a strong affection for her. He didn't want to be estranged from her, so he exiled himself. After all, according to his own vague memories, he should have been quite good before the age of 10. He changed after his rebirth at the age of 10, and it was a subtle change. As he grew up year after year, he understood more and more. He also understood Gue Fei Su's character more and more. In that case, it was completely reasonable to say that it was all because of Gue Fei Su. The reason why they fell out now was mainly because Gue Fei Su was becoming more and more excessive. It was already unbearable. The first sign of this was when they returned from Jiangnan. Because Li Hongyuan's situation was special, Lu Qingdi didn't want him to be too capable and have thoughts that he shouldn't have. Therefore, when Li Hanyuan developed in the direction of a good-for-nothing trash, Lu Qingdi favored him more and more. However, The result of his self-exile and the result of someone else's deliberate actions were definitely two different concepts. If Lu Qingdi believed in Li Hongyuan's words, then for the sake of balance, even if Gui Fei Su wasn't immediately banished to the Cold Palace, she wouldn't be separated from her position. The Jade Essence Palace would also become a Cold Palace without a name. Therefore, it was actually very easy for Li Hongyuan to completely overthrow Gui Fei Su. He only needed to move his lips and put on an emotional show. Li Hongyuan hadn't made a move against her because he needed time to cultivate his power. Only when the Empress's faction and Gui Fei Su's faction were evenly matched could he be safer, more hidden, and more time. Now it was about time. Gui Fei Su's value had reached its end. Moreover, she shouldn't have targeted Jingwan. Therefore, Li Hongyuan naturally wouldn't feign civility with her. Although the four of them were isolated, how could such a big movement not attract the attention of others? However, this matter was related to the King of Hell. Even if they were curious, it was best not to get involved. Some things should be listened to if they could, but if they couldn't, then it was best to pretend that they didn't know anything. This was the best. Because the imperial physicians were all in the Sweet Dew Palace, Lu Qingdi was also there. On one hand, it was because of Qin Shufei. On the other hand, he wasn't in the mood to have fun with others. If he wasn't in the mood and it was cold, he naturally wouldn't come out. At this time, Gui Fei Su's people went to invite the imperial physicians, so Lu Qingdi had to be alerted. Therefore, the shadow in Lu Qingdi's heart was definitely not small. In the end, she was a woman that he had doted on for 20 to 30 years. It was impossible for Lu Qingdi to not ask. With this question, his head hurt even more. Although the person who was asked couldn't give a reason. After Old Sixth came back from Jiangnan, he had been unhappy with his mother. It seemed that they hadn't completely eased up. Now it had escalated to another level. Therefore, if Li Hongyuan wanted to have a falling out with Gui Fei Su now, the foundation had already been set on fire. After all, Lu Qingdi himself thought so too. Call Old Sixth to the Sweet Dew Palace. Lu Qingdi thought for a moment, and bring his Wang Fei along. Since Lu Qingdi had asked someone to invite him, Li Hongyuan still had to give face. Moreover, he wanted his old man to see him being wronged, sad, and angry. It was acting, so naturally, he had to put on a full performance. Only then would it be perfect. Moreover, some of his goals had been completely achieved. There was no need to continue staying in the palace. Taking advantage of his bad mood to leave, his old man would most likely agree. Even if Jingwan didn't feel cold, he would still feel distressed. Not long after they arrived, Lu Qingdi came out from the inner hall. When he saw Li Hongyuan's gloomy expression, he gave off an aura that said, "Don't get close to me." All right, before he even asked anything, Lu Qingdi's heart softened. He sat down and raised his hand to Jingwan, who was greeting him, to let her rise. "What's going on now? Were you arguing with your mother?" He didn't even mind that Li Hongyuan didn't greet him. Arguing, Li Hongyuan sneered. "In father's eyes, am I a 3-year-old child? All right. Then tell me what's going on." He was already physically and mentally exhausted, but this matter kept coming one after another. "If father wants to know, you should ask mother directly. Why ask me? I don't know." Li Hongyuan seemed to be poked at his reverse scale, and his face became colder and colder. Although Li Hongyuan didn't make Lu Qingdi angry and often talked back to him, Lu Qingdi had never seen Li Hongyuan like this. At that time, Li Hongyuan was mostly arrogant and insolent. But now, under the coldness, there was anger and grievance. Lu Qingdi really couldn't smash things and scold Li Hongyuan like he used to. He rubbed his temples. "All right, don't say it. I'll ask your mother later. No matter what your mother says or does, she still cares about you. Don't make too much of a fuss. Rest in Sweet Dew Palace for a while, and then go back home. Anyway, there's nothing for you to do in the palace." As for the matter of imperial concubine Su asking for an imperial physician, whether Li Hongyuan knew or not, he didn't mention it. With his son's current anger, even if he showed weakness and forced him to lower his head now, the backlash would probably be more serious. It was better to wait for his anger to subside. Therefore, Lu Qingdi didn't consider imperial concubine Su's feelings at all. He didn't care if she would feel better after seeing her son now. Obviously, between imperial concubines Su and Li Hongyuan, Lu Qingdi chose his son without hesitation. As a bystander, Jingwan emotionally wanted to clap her hands and praise Lu Qingdi for doing a good job. But rationally, she could only say that Lu Qingdi was too much of a scumbag tonight. He had already let down one person after another, and now he was rudely rubbing salt on people's wounds. And this wasn't the first time she saw Li Hongyuan's acting, but every time she saw it, she would gasp in amazement. Several people came in from outside the hall. Gong Jiu, Yu Zhongqing, and Li Suyin were among them. "Greetings, Your Majesty. Rise. What's the result of the investigation?" Lu Qingdi was still most concerned about imperial concubine Qin being poisoned. After all, this matter could also be related to his life. If he couldn't find out the truth, Lu Qingdi wouldn't have a moment of peace. Replying to Your Majesty, the source of the other half of the poison has been found. It came from a sachet used by imperial concubine Shu. What was slightly different from the previous prediction was that imperial concubine Shu didn't only come into contact with this sachet once. She had been wearing it since before the banquet. The source of the sachet has also been found. Imperial concubine Shu's things all came from a Ministry of Internal Affairs. Basically, she didn't let anyone buy it. The same goes for the sachet. According to the Ministry of Internal Affairs, a batch of sachets was sent to the harem yesterday. However, imperial concubine Shu wasn't the only one. All the concubines above the rank of concubine in the harem had a share. Moreover, the sachets only have different fabrics and embroidery patterns on the outside, but the fragrance inside is the same, Yu Zhongqing said. In this way, all the concubines above the rank of concubine had a share. Or rather, to confuse the public, they made such a scene to prevent the culprit from being found out quickly. However, if there was a problem with something from the Ministry of Internal Affairs, it was a very dangerous signal. After all, in the entire palace, too many things came from the Ministry of Internal Affairs. If there was a problem with one, there could be a second or third one. Therefore, Lu Qingdi's expression didn't improve at all. Your Majesty, there's no problem with the Ministry of Internal Affairs. This commoner has said before that the other half of the poison is different from the one fed to the chickens. The effect of the poison doesn't last long. Therefore, although many concubines in the harem have a sachet, imperial concubine Shu sachet must have been tampered with before she used it. Hearing Gong Jiu's words, Lu Qingdi finally let out a sigh of relief. Is it easy to get this poison? It's difficult. When it's made into a finished medicine, it's too toxic to be carried. If you're careless, you'll hurt yourself easily. If you're not very proficient in it, you won't dare to touch it easily. As for separating, even if you only separate one medicine, there must be another medicine in the remaining part. As the saying goes, success depends on it, and failure depends on it. There are several medicines in this poison that are hard to get. Once they're processed, they'll lose their efficacy very quickly. Putting that special medicine can prolong the efficacy of these medicines, but it won't last long. At the same time, it's also the most important component of this poison. Because it's a special poison itself, it can make a weak person have a kind of final radiance of health. However, when the effect of the medicine is over, the person will be weaker than before. The effect will last for a long time. If it's serious, it may even shorten the person's life. When I was studying medicine with my teacher, I saw this medicine once. My teacher warned me that this medicine was harmful and not beneficial, so I shouldn't use it lightly. This medicine mostly grows in the southwest near southern Qi. More than 90% of it grows on cliffs and precipices. However, according to my teacher, some people who didn't know the truth named this medicine Revival and planted it. Borrowing its special revival effect, it was once widely used by the locals. Later, when they learned of its harmful effects, it was gradually abandoned by the locals. However, I've heard of a few cases. There's no specific region, but it feels very much like it was caused by revival. From what you're saying, the medicine called Revival should have been made in the palace before the banquet, just like the other medicines that lose their efficacy easily. Your Majesty, it must be so. The advantages and disadvantages of this poison are very obvious. If used properly, its power is limitless. However, if used improperly, all previous efforts will be wasted. Lu Qingdi was relieved. Is it necessary to go to such great lengths to feed poisonous chickens? Your Majesty, there's actually a possibility that you've misunderstood one thing. Making a medicine and putting it into the chicken feed is a process of preparing the chicken feed. The chickens that can be brought into the palace should be specially raised. The process of preparing chicken feed is not simple. Adding an extra step can't be considered a great deal of trouble. The ingredients themselves are easy to obtain. The problem with the poisonous chickens can't be found, and it's easy to enter deep into the palace. The other half of the poison can be used to take advantage of the fact that the medicine disperses quickly, and it's easy to destroy the corpse and erase all traces. For example, today, if no one noticed that the poisonous chickens were easy to rot, or if I didn't happen to know something, how could I have found the source of the poison? In other people's ears, Gong Jiu sounded like he was boasting. They had to admit that he was right. Some of the ingredients for this poison were difficult to obtain, but it didn't mean that they couldn't be obtained. Once obtained, the success rate was very high. Even if they didn't succeed, it was easy to get away with it. How did that poisonous chicken get here? Have you found out? Since it was extra, it couldn't have sneaked in from outside the palace. In the palace, every main hall, side hall, and even the back hall had a small kitchen. Some concubines could always find ways to get special things for themselves. Later, it became an unspoken rule. However, those things were strictly checked when they entered the palace. The concubines also knew that they shouldn't easily accept other people's things. Basically, they lived in peace. Therefore, the imperial kitchen was not the only place where there were chickens. Your Majesty, it's clear. It said that a little eunuch of the imperial kitchen brought it in from outside. According to the words of the other people in the imperial kitchen, the eunuch even shouted that the person in charge of the chickens was so careless that he ran out. Because they were all familiar with each other, no one thought much about it. When it was traced, the little eunuch had been killed, and the clues were cut off. We didn't dare to enter the harem without permission. Lu Qingdi sneered. The person behind the scenes is very cunning. He was one step ahead. Even if the poisonous chicken was the real harem, it must be gone by now. And this kind of thing, Lu Qingdi actually didn't want to talk about his wives. That would be very shameful, and it would be even more shameful if they couldn't find out. One of Lu Qingdi's eunuchs hurried in. Your Majesty, someone from the Kunyi Palace came. The Empress was forced to attend the banquet. She caught a cold, and her condition worsened. Now she is in a coma. Lu Qingdi suddenly stood up. It wasn't that he cared about the Empress. It was just that he just knew that the Empress came back to life, and this happened. Everyone looked at each other. Wasn't this too much of a coincidence? But thinking carefully, the Empress seemed to be in good spirits at the banquet. Then was it her? https://11/118007/8288208. Mobile Edition. Chapter 415. Come, prepare a carriage for Kunyi Palace. All of you follow me. Lu Qingdi stood up and strode out of the Sweet Dew Palace. He didn't look like he was going to visit the seriously ill Empress Su, but more like he was preparing to denounce her for causing a ruckus in Kunyi Palace. Jingwan turned to look at Li Hanyuan, asking with her eyes, "Should we go?" Li Hanyuan stood up slowly. Naturally, he had to go. This matter was still unclear. Li Hanyuan didn't allow this kind of thing to exist. According to Lu Qingdi, it didn't matter whether they went or not. There was still something to talk about. Li Hanyuan wanted to go, so Jingwan naturally followed. Although she had nothing to do, she didn't need to do anything. She only needed to be the perfect background or watch the show. Jingwan walked beside Li Hanyuan and followed behind Lu Qingdi. Behind them were Gong Jiu and the other two. Naturally, no one spoke along the way. When there was nothing to do, one's mind would either be empty or thinking about something. Jingwan's current situation was the latter. When Imperial concubine Qin was poisoned, Lu Qingdi accompanied her at all times. When the Empress fell ill, Lu Qingdi immediately went over. Only Imperial concubine Su, other than calling 2 imperial physicians over, did not make a single splash. If noble consort Su knew about this situation, who knew how she would react? Among the 3 of them, she was the most favored one. Although Lu Qingdi had a reason for going to Kunyi Palace, noble consort Su didn't know it. Look at Li Hanyuan. He went to Kunyi Palace and didn't go to her. A fake illness became a real illness, and a minor illness became a serious illness. Lu Qingdi might have a reason, but Li Hanyuan didn't. At least, in everyone's eyes, he didn't. Putting herself in his shoes, both her husband and son were like this. If her tolerance was poor, it was possible that she would vomit blood and die from anger. Of course, noble consort Su's tolerance wouldn't be that bad. However, from some people's point of view, the more miserable she was, the better. When Emperor Lu Qingdi arrived, all the people in the Kunyi Palace, except for the Empress and those who did not dare to leave, welcomed him in fear and trepidation. Lu Qingdi ignored them and went straight to the inner hall. Other than Gong Jiu, everyone else stopped. It was not the first time that the servants in the inner hall had seen Gong Jiu, so they did not show any unusual expressions when they saw a non-imperial physician enter. Lu Qingdi sat on the side and motioned for Gong Jiu to come forward and treat the Empress. Gong Jiu naturally knew what to treat. Gong Jiu first checked the pulse, then used silver needles to insert a few needles into certain places of the Empress. Because they did not know medicine, the palace servants only thought that he was saving the Empress. Gong Jiu quickly came to a conclusion and nodded slightly to Lu Qingdi. Lu Qingdi was so angry that he knocked over the teacup that was just handed to him. The servant was frightened by Lu Qingdi's sudden movement. At the same time, he didn't know why, so he just knelt on the ground instinctively. "Your Majesty, please calm down," Gong Jiu said emotionlessly. Lu Qingdi calmed down. He also knew that even if the Empress took the medicine, she might not have had anything to do with this matter. Although he could kill, imprison, and demote most people in the world at will, there were still some people that he had to show evidence, even if it was just forged evidence, to convict them. He did not want to kill the Empress, so he would not forge evidence. However, he had to find out the ins and outs of the matter. What did Her Majesty eat today? Her Majesty's phoenix body originally needed to rest. Originally, she would have recovered in half a month at most. After a month, she would have recovered to 70 to 80%. Now, her body is rapidly weakening. According to this situation, it will most likely affect her lifespan. Gong Jiu said faintly as he gave the Empress acupuncture. When these servants heard this, they were so scared that their souls almost flew out of their bodies. "What are you waiting for? Tell me now. If anything happens to the Empress, I will flog you all to death." Your Majesty, the Empress's food is very carefully. We dare not neglect it at all. The Empress really didn't eat anything special. There is no problem with the food. Then what about the medicine? Is there any change in the medicine the Empress takes? Gong Jiu continued to ask. Hearing this, several people's faces changed. Obviously, there was a problem. "Tell me now." Lu Qingdi was furious. "A group of blind bastards. Your Majesty, the Empress felt weak and didn't want to have any accident at the birthday banquet. So, she asked the imperial doctor to prescribe a dose of tiger and wolf medicine. The imperial doctor is the Empress's usual doctor. He said the medicine would make the Empress feel better, but there might be sequelae. The Empress's recovery time would probably be delayed. He didn't say it would shorten the Empress's lifespan. That bastard, how dare he, how dare he?" The aunt who looked older was angry and angry. She cried and cursed. Gong Jiu asked them to bring the dregs of the medicine the Empress took. Lu Qingdi sent people out and asked Li Suyin to arrest the person. What a coincidence! The imperial doctor who was qualified to enter the palace was the one who prescribed the medicine to the Empress. He couldn't enter the palace because of cold. The people of the blackguard acted quickly. There would be a result soon. After Gong Jiu temporarily stabilized the Empress's condition, he sorted out the dregs one by one. Among them, there was one that was quite obvious. "This is a revival?" Lu Qingdi asked in a deep voice. "Yes, Your Majesty." As he spoke, he frowned. "We've used too much. There are at least 5 plants of rejuvenation. Under normal circumstances, even if we have to take rejuvenation due to special circumstances, 3 plants is the maximum. The Empress's current situation is not optimistic. She might even, hearing Gong Jio's words, the people around the Empress almost collapsed. But in this way, the suspicion that the Empress was the mastermind behind the poisoning was reduced a lot. However, it couldn't be ruled out 100%. After all, the Empress might not know the true effect of the revival. So, the question is, was there a third party? It might not even be the Empress who poisoned the Empress, but a third party who killed 2 birds with 1 stone. Qin Shu Fei and the Empress were poisoned at the same time. Qin Shu Fei might die, and the Empress might use the revival too much and become weak, falling ill until the end of her life. According to this direction, the one who benefited the most was often the real culprit. Imperial concubine Su? But Imperial concubine Su wasn't a fool. When the Empress first fell ill, she was very nervous. Prince Kong acted with restraint. She also told her son not to act rashly, or at least not to rush to expand. During this time, the one who really jumped the most fiercely was the Gong Prince. So, it was more likely that there was a 4th person behind this, preparing to be the final fisherman. However, when everyone thought that it was impossible, it just happened to become possible. Was he trying to avoid responsibility? Therefore, Imperial concubine Su's suspicion couldn't be washed away. However, so far, everything was still in a fog, and the key thread hadn't been grasped yet. Lu Qingdi looked at the Empress on the bed in silence. Can the Empress' condition be cured? Replying to your Majesty, no, it can only be alleviated. The amount of revival the Empress used was beyond our expectations. Now, we can only expel the remaining medicinal effects from her body, minimizing the greatest damage. After that, the Empress Phoenix body will need at least 3 months to recover. After that, she won't be as healthy as before and will age easily. Winter is cold, summer is hot, and the slightest carelessness will cause her to fall ill. It will be more difficult for her to recover compared to ordinary people. Gong Jio, in line with the ethics of a doctor, didn't add any details and spoke frankly. Do your best. Lu Qingdi waved his hand. From these words, it could be heard that the Empress really didn't have much of the Emperor's heart. If he really cared, it wouldn't be about doing his best. It would be about curing her. Your Majesty, this commoner will first induce vomiting with the Empress, and then prepare the medicinal bath. It will still take some time. This commoner suggests that your Majesty invite other imperial physicians to take the Emperor's pulse. Lu Qingdi actually felt that it wasn't necessary, but he also knew Gong Jio's concerns. After all, he was the physician of Jin Xin Wang Fu. If he was the only one handling the matter, someone might make an issue out of it, and Jin Xin Wang would inevitably be implicated. After all, Jin Xin Wang also had a reason to make a move on the Empress, although it might be a bit far-fetched to say it. Who let him be Imperial concubine Su's adopted son, and even said that the recent slight discord between mother and son was an act. Therefore, Lu Qingdi nodded and let someone call over the imperial physicians of Sweet Dew Palace. Then, he sent someone to inform Imperial concubine Su of this matter at a later time. Lu Qingdi was very clear that these women in his harem were very powerful. If he wanted to completely suppress them, he still needed some means from time to time. Although he didn't want to admit it, this was indeed one of the reasons why Lu Qingdi couldn't casually deal with them. Just think, if it was just a woman with average ability, he could just cripple her. Even if he wanted to build another balance, it was also an easy matter. After all, the majority of the women in the harem relied on his honor and favor. That's right, the majority. But these women were too powerful. If he dealt with them, Lu Qingdi was worried that it would leave behind hidden dangers. It was better to keep them and restrain each other. The other women in the harem would also have fewer opportunities to cause trouble. Regarding the situation in the inner hall, the people in the outer hall weren't very clear, but they could more or less guess. Li Suyin's ability to do things was also unquestionable, but it was still a step too late. That imperial physician died in his own study room. It looked like a suicide. When the blackguard came, the family found out about it. The imperial physician's residence was already in a mess. However, Li Suyin was unmoved. She ordered the small residence to be guarded. After that, she immediately went to the imperial physician's hospital to check the prescription for the empress. In the end, there wasn't any. She also asked the imperial physician's hospital, but unexpectedly, there was no recovery of this medicine. When Li Suyin reported to Lu Qingdi, the other imperial physicians were also present. Their foreheads were all covered in cold sweat. After all, that was a colleague they met not long ago. Lu Qingdi's face was expressionless. Perhaps, after the little eunuch in the imperial kitchen was silenced, he already expected that there might be more deaths. However, since something happened outside the palace, it was the Supreme Court's responsibility. At the same time, imperial concubine Su, who received the news, was scared out of her wits. She couldn't care less about her anger. Her body, which was originally not very good, was much better after such a scare. She couldn't lie on the bed anymore and hurried to Yikuan Palace. After all, she was a concubine and didn't have so many scruples. She directly entered the inner hall. Seeing so many people, she paused and tidied up her appearance. This concubine greets the emperor. "You're here." Lu Qingdi's voice was indifferent, as if he was very sure that she would come. Imperial concubine Su was frightened. She doubted whether she was right to rush over in the first place. Besides, could it be that the emperor really suspected that she did it? "Your Majesty," Lu Qingdi glanced at her indifferently. Imperial concubine Su tactfully shut her mouth and didn't dare to say more. When the empress began to soak in the medicinal bath, Lu Qingdi took the irrelevant people to the outer hall. Before Lu Qingdi could say anything, Li Hongyuan stood up first. "The palace is a mess now. This son will leave first and return to the residence." His gaze didn't fall on Imperial concubine Su. Imperial concubine Su was in a hurry just now and didn't notice Li Hongyuan. In fact, Li Hongyuan deliberately shrank to a relatively dark place. Yuan Li Hongyuan glanced at her this time. "Mother, have you finally discovered this son's existence?" His face was a little gloomy. "You want her to know that this son will take his leave." He turned and left. Jingwan hurriedly squatted down and then chased after him. Imperial concubine Su's heart thumped. She knew that she was in trouble. She subconsciously turned to look at Lu Qingdi. Lu Qingdi stared at her with a gloomy face. Imperial concubine Su had seen his eyes like this before, but she wasn't the one who had to bear it. Now that she was baptized, she felt the terror of the emperor's prestige from the bottom of her heart. Imperial concubine Su was sick because of Yuan. Now that you heard that the empress's condition worsened, you immediately recovered. You were in such a hurry that you didn't even see your own son. Zhen is very gratified that you have such a deep sisterly relationship. She came, and her son left. Lu Qingdi was certain of certain things. These words made Imperial concubine Su's scalp tingle and her heart tremble. However, she couldn't defend herself at all, because these were the facts. Lu Qingdi's words simply confirmed that Imperial concubine Su was pretending to be sick. When it came to her own interests and safety, she recovered faster than anyone else and ran away faster than anyone else. The son that she cared so much about before was completely thrown aside at this moment. In addition, this was a typical example of selfishness. Who did Lu Qingdi care about the most now? His sixth son, Jin Qinhuang Li Hongyuan. Imperial concubine Su's unfailing favor for many years was Li Hongyuan. Thinking of the situation that she might face in the future, Imperial concubine Su could only suffer in silence. Jingwan and Li Hongyuan left Kuan Yi Palace and really directly left the palace. After sitting in the carriage, Jingwan seriously looked at Li Hongyuan. That, when this man wanted to cheat people, it was really easy to do so anytime and anywhere. Jingwan leaned against Li Hongyuan's side. "We can finally go home and rest well." Her body also softened. Li Hongyuan pulled her into his arms. "We should have left the palace earlier." "It doesn't matter." "However, Yuan, this time's matter." Jingwan stared at Li Hongyuan. https:///11/11807/85 25600. Chapter 416. Li Honyuan laughed in spite of himself. It wasn't me. Jingwan was very suspicious. With such a big lineup, how could several people fall down in one go? Well, the Gong Prince shouldn't be counted. After all, that was because he had a big mouth and asked for it. Apart from a certain person, who else could have such connections? Thinking about it, if it was a certain high-ranking concubine in the imperial harem, it was still possible. After all, the imperial harem was their territory. If it was Qin Shu Fei, she was the least suspicious. She had always been low-key. She couldn't think of a reason why she would put on such a show. She even almost threw herself into it. She couldn't have known that Jin Qinhuang Fu's doctor was so powerful. Jin Qinhuang's trust in her obviously couldn't be that high. The other two, any fully prepared plan may have an accident. This accident may cause the plan to have a flaw, imperfection, or direct failure. It may also make the plan perfect or even flawless. Li Honyuan was still a bit unhappy about his wife's suspicion, but he didn't show it at this time. Yuan's meaning is, tonight's matter was actually intentionally added? The possibility is very high. Li Honyuan slightly narrowed his eyes, as if thinking of something, but these things have nothing to do with us. If you're tired, then rest. Jingwan leaned on Li Hongyuan's shoulder and rubbed against his neck. Tonight, it was really late. Because of the usual routine of work and rest, she was already a bit tired. Right now, the environment was quiet and warm, with all the familiar smells. Naturally, she became more and more drowsy. She softly hummed. Because she was close, Li Honyuan could hear it very clearly. Soon, her breathing became low and slow, the warm breath sprinkling on the skin of Li Hongyuan's neck. Li Honyuan adjusted Jingwan's position, letting her sleep more comfortably. He fell into a short silence, then, how is it? Although Li Honyuan didn't bring many people into the palace, it didn't mean that the people he left outside the palace were completely aware of the situation inside the palace. Don't forget, Yu Zhongqing was now working for him. Yu Zhongqing definitely had people who were loyal to him. The Imperial Guards were a very special existence in the Imperial Palace. Except for some of the main halls in the Imperial Palace, there was basically no place they couldn't set foot in. While they protected the safety of the Imperial Palace, they were actually a kind of hidden danger. This was because once they were controlled by someone, it was basically equivalent to controlling the lifeline of the entire Imperial Palace. Therefore, the position of the chief commander was very important. The choice had to be made carefully. It was also because of this that so many people wanted a rope in Yu Zhongqing. Not to mention other things. Even if they didn't want to overthrow the emperor, it would be easier for them to obtain the situation in the Imperial Palace. Reply to Master. All aspects are watching. The things that should be investigated will be known by tomorrow morning at the latest. And he said in a low voice outside. If Jingwan was awake, she might only be able to hear the gist of it, but Li Honyuan could hear it clearly. If it doesn't involve the Wang mansion and the Luo family, don't worry about it. If anyone dares to reach out their hands, don't be polite and chop them all. It wasn't that Li Honyuan thought too much. It was purely to prepare for a rainy day. After all, the protective layer wrapped around him was not as reinforced as before. It was unknown if someone vaguely saw something. It could be a test, or it could be another mistake. He couldn't let it go. In short, it was always right to be cautious. Yes. Returning to the Wang mansion, Li Honyuan carried Jingwan back to the heated room. It was warm, and he didn't wake her up. He drew water, wiped his face, washed his hands, soaked his feet, and undid his hair. His movements were very light. When Jingwan showed signs of waking up, Li Honyuan softly coaxed her twice in her ear. Like this, in the end, she was completely stuffed into the bed that had already been warmed up. Jingwan was at most in a half-awake, half-asleep state. Once she sank in, she naturally slept more soundly. When Li Honyuan also got on the bed, she took the initiative to lean over. Jin Qinhuang's body was strong, and his blood was vigorous. In the winter, he was definitely a top-notch human-shaped heater. It was just that this summer, perhaps he suffered a little. However, after his summer's baptism, Jingwan also knew that she shouldn't think that the heat could get rid of this man's clinging nature. The two of them were comfortable, but the majority of the people in the palace were absolutely uncomfortable, no matter what the reason was. Before Wei Xianfei, the three people with the highest positions in the inner palace had problems one after another. In addition to those who were worried about their own interests, there were also those who were worried about themselves. As for their maternal families, there were both. They all wanted to ask Lu Qingdi to let them go see the Jianyang. However, let alone getting permission, even the people who passed on the message refused. Even if they were stuffed with thick benefits, at this time, no one dared to accept. Lu Qingdi's mood was originally very bad. At this time, no matter what the reason was, in his view, it could be adding to the chaos. As a result, if they went forward, it was simply hitting the muzzle of a gun. The palace attendants were also not much. After receiving benefits, they also wanted to enjoy it. Imperial concubine Su's suffering was only more and more. Lu Qingdi had already noted it. If she could not ease the relationship with her adopted son for a long time, then the debt would continue to increase. However, her relationship with her adopted son was getting worse and worse. If she wanted to redeem it, the premise was that she could see him. Now, the situation. Imperial concubine Su was very uncomfortable, but now she was forcing herself to hold on. If she really collapsed, it would only anger Lu Qingdi even more. It would confirm that she was indeed pretending. If she wanted to be well, she would be well, and if she wanted to be sick, she would be sick. At the most uncomfortable moment, even if the matter was not clear, Lu Qingdi could not continue to detain them. He could only let them go to their respective places. How to put it? Even those who had a good time outside heaved a sigh of relief. Whether these people could sleep or not was one thing. Tonight, the most tired person was definitely Gong Jiao. It was not easy to help the Empress disperse the remaining medicine and help Imperial concubine Qin make the antidote. These were not easy tasks. It was estimated that he would not be able to sleep for the whole night. However, as a secret guard, he just did not sleep for one night. It would not affect him much even if he did not sleep for 3 days. However, after all, his identity was no longer the same. He had to pretend that there was a problem even if there was no problem at all. Otherwise, it would be suspicious. After the Empress finished the medicinal bath, his face was obviously tired. It seemed that he had been forcing himself to hold on. With Gong Jiao's medical skills, it was simply too easy to make something very realistic on his body without leaving a trace. It was even impossible to find any abnormalities. Your Majesty, please allow me to rest for a while before making the antidote with Imperial concubine Qin. I'm not in a good state now. I'm worried that something will go wrong in the process of making the antidote. Lu Qingdi saw that his face was faintly pale. It was obvious that he was tired. It seemed that he had consumed a lot of energy. You work hard today. As long as you can ensure that Imperial concubine Qin is safe and sound, there's no harm in resting. When the Empress and Imperial concubine Qin are cured, Zhen will reward you heavily. Your Majesty is too serious. I'm just following orders. Moreover, treating and saving people is just the doctor's intention. When Lu Qingdi heard this, his heart cooled a little. He admitted that he already had the thought of snatching people from his son. Just think about it. With such a doctor whose medical skills surpassed all the imperial doctors in the imperial hospital, his heart would definitely be more at ease. However, to snatch people from his son, it was still a little embarrassing. If it was another son, all right, if it was another son, they would have already sent people to him to fulfill their filial piety. That evil creature. Lu Qingdi still felt depressed when he thought about it. However, if it was someone else who sent such a skilled doctor, he would suspect that his son was plotting something. No matter how good the doctor's medical skills were, he would not use him. Zhen has always been clear about rewards and punishments. You are a person of Jinqin Wangfu. What you deserve will not be less. Go rest. Many thanks to your Majesty. Gong Jiao prepared to leave, but his feet paused. Your Majesty's 10,000 gold body is related to the entire Qi Yuan. Your Majesty should take more care of yourself. Lu Qingdi also understood what he meant. How can I sleep? Your Majesty, why don't you let the imperial doctors take your pulse and prescribe some medicine to calm nerves? You are better. What Jin wants him to do, you just have to take a look with Jin. Gong Jio frowned. Your Majesty, you can't say it like that. As the saying goes, every profession has its own specialization. The imperial doctors have rich medical experience and are not comparable to this commoner. It's just that they are a little more steady in their actions. Don't make excuses for them. Jin has not faced them for a day or two. How could Jin not know their situation? The group of imperial doctors couldn't help but be valiant again. Their role here was only to take the Emperor's pulse. Before and after each medicinal bath, they couldn't relax. Other than that, they also studied Gong Jio's prescription. Among them, there were some who knew about resurrection, but the name was not the same. They also knew a little about its effects, but they didn't know that after a certain amount, the consequences would be so serious. They wanted to know, and Gong Jio was not stingy with his answers. In this way, in Lu Qingdi's heart, he established a strict and serious image. He was not taciturn in the field of pathology and pharmacology. He did not hide anything and was not arrogant. He adhered to the heart of a doctor. Compared to the group of people in the imperial hospital who had become sophisticated and slick, he was indeed much better. You also don't need to be long-winded. Lu Qingdi stretched out his wrist. Gong Jio did not refuse again. Gong Jio took her pulse and quickly wrote out a prescription. Before he left, his gaze fell on noble consort Su. Noble consort, your body is not feeling well. Take medicine when you need to, rest when you need to. You should also relax your mind. When noble consort Su heard this, her expression changed slightly. She glanced at Lu Qingdi imperceptibly. Jin knows what to do about my body. Thank you for your concern. This commoner will take his leave. Gong Jio did not say anything unnecessary and went straight to the side hall to rest. Since the Empress wanted the imperial doctors to take her pulse again, Lu Qingdi was no exception. The imperial doctors came forward one by one and looked at Gong Jio's prescription. There is no better prescription than this. Rest assured, they let people get the medicine and boil it. Lu Qingdi tilted his head and looked at noble consort Su. Take the noble consort's pulse too. Gong Jio's words at least proved that noble consort Su was not very well. Lu Qingdi's attitude towards her also eased a little. Noble consort Su's eyes were slightly red with tears. Thank you, Your Majesty. You've worked hard today. Go back and rest early. Don't tire yourself out and make the children worry. Therefore, she was not feeling well because she was tired, not because she was angry with her son. She was busy for the birthday, so no matter how tired she still had to say that the Emperor's grace was vast and mighty. Noble consort Su's words were quite beautiful, and Lu Qingdi's heart was much smoother. Both of them took the medicine separately. Lu Qingdi soon felt sleepy, and the idea of snatching Gong Jio became stronger in his heart. Lu Qingdi rested in the Kunyi Palace. On the birthday, it seemed to be no problem to rest anywhere. However, speaking of which, the newly conferred Consort Wei should have rested in Consort Wei Xian's Iha Palace to show his favor. Unfortunately, when Lu Qingdi fell asleep, noble consort Su destroyed the Jade Essence Palace. She was obviously very tired, but she couldn't sleep at this moment and fell into a long silence. After an hour, Gong Jio got up and continued to work. Although the ingredients for the antidote were rare and expensive, there was never a lack of these in the imperial palace, so it didn't delay anything. This poison was overbearing, but the antidote worked quickly. After noble consort Su took the antidote, her condition improved visibly. The next morning, when she was having dinner with Li Hanyuan, someone from the imperial palace came in a hurry, saying that noble consort Shu had woken up and just wanted to see Jin Xin Wang and Jin Xin Wang Fei. https://11//11/18076786790. Biku Pavilion Mobile Reading Website. M. Chapter 417. Not to mention the others. Even Li Honyuan had a trace of doubt in his eyes. After imperial concubine Shu came back from the gates of hell, even if the first person she wanted to see was not Lu Qingdi, it should be her maiden family. Why would it be the two of them? Jingwan looked at Li Honyuan and slightly raised her eyebrows. You're not going to explain? Li Honyuan picked up a crystal bun and put it on Jingwan's plate. Eat up. After you're done, go to the palace to take a look. So there was no explanation? Jingwan understood. She continued to eat, and her speed increased a bit. Originally, she was almost done eating, so it didn't take much time, because the people from the Sweet Dew Palace were still waiting, and they looked very anxious. Jingwan didn't dawdle, and even urged Li Honyuan to hurry up. No matter who it was, as long as Jingwan was a bit too concerned, Li Honyuan would definitely be unhappy. The more Jingwan urged, the more he directly sat down and pulled Jingwan into his arms. His hands slightly exerted force and held her firmly. His meaning couldn't be more obvious. Jingwan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. All right, let's take it slow. Otherwise, let's not go to the palace. Anyway, it's quite cold. It's more comfortable to stay at home. Jingwan simply smoothed his hair and gave him 2 kisses. Li Honyuan looked at her coldly. Wan, do you think this husband is so easy to fool? Do you think I don't know what you mean? Jingwan wrapped her arms around his neck and leaned forward to rub against him, acting coquettishly. Well, some things are better known. Don't expose it. If it's exposed, it won't be fun anymore. Li Honyuan was still smiling, but he was still a little cold. All right then. Today, your husband will have some fun with Wan. Jingwan hurriedly supported his shoulder. What kind of joke was this? If this went on, she really wouldn't be able to leave the house today. The insincere smoothing became extremely sincere. To put it bluntly, it was like ceding territory and paying compensation. She smoothed out a certain someone's hair. Jingwan was also depressed. It was not her problem to begin with. Why should she pay the price? Jingwan felt that this wouldn't do. After Qin Shufei recovered, she had to ask her for some benefits. When the person in the Sweet Dew Palace saw that Li Honyuan and Jingwan had finally finished tidying up, he gently breathed a sigh of relief. Although it took a little longer, fortunately, this ancestor did not shirk his responsibilities. In the past, even if the emperor or the imperial consort summoned him, would he not go? If he really encountered such a situation, today was different from yesterday. His attire was not as solemn as before. He was still meticulous. Li Honyuan, this person, although his reputation was terrible, his appearance had always been impeccable. Even in the Fu, other than when he was hanging out with Jingwan, he was always like this. Sometimes, Jingwan even had an illusion that this man was abstinent. Of course, an illusion was an illusion. This man did not have the slightest bit of abstinence. Lu Qingdi had some matters to attend to, so the husband and wife went directly to the Sweet Dew Palace. This was the first time that Jingwan and Li Honyuan entered Qin Shufei's bedroom. Alright, in reality, Li Honyuan had only been to the Sweet Dew Palace a few times, let alone Jingwan. Qin Shufei was not lying on the bed. Instead, she was leaning on the couch by the window. She had even woken up and carefully groomed herself. Being poisoned last night should have hurt her greatly. The person who was usually healthy and rosy was now pale. Facing the light outside the window, there was even a faint sense of transparency on her face. She looked fragile and fragile. Originally, compared to the Empress and Imperial Consort Su, Qin Shufei had never given birth to a child. Under the circumstances of being around the same age, her figure was the best. The 3 of them had their own characteristics and each had their own merits. However, the 3 of them did not have the characteristics of a sickly beauty. Qin Shufei was now putting on a show. There was only one person left to serve Qin Shufei. Her eyes were closed, and she should have fallen asleep. However, her eyelids were trembling, and her eyes seemed to be moving slightly. It was obvious that she was not sleeping well. Seeing Jingwan and the others enter, that palace maid hurriedly got up to greet them. After getting permission, she got up. Jingwan was still thinking about what to do now that Shufei Nyang was sleeping. That palace maid had already leaned close to Qin Shufei and softly said, Nyang, Jin Wang and Jin Wang Fei have arrived. She was obviously worried that her voice would be too loud and startle Qin Shufei. Jingwan originally wanted to stop that palace maid. At this time, the patient was naturally more important. Unexpectedly, just as the palace maid's voice fell, Qin Shufei immediately opened her eyes. Her gaze fell on the two people. There was a kind of feeling that in her eyes, they were the only existences in the world. Jingwan's heart was somewhat numb, to the extent that she did not dare to continue moving forward. Although Qin Shufei did not do anything, Jingwan felt that there was something abnormal about Qin Shufei. Moreover, no matter what, even though she was looking at the two of them, Jingwan felt that she was only looking at a certain person beside her. It was as if she had nothing to do with it. Jingwan wanted to turn her head and ask Li Honyuan what was going on. However, being stared at by Qin Shufei like that, it did not seem too good to do so. As time passed, Qin Shufei's gaze became more and more strange. It was as if she was looking at her own child, incomparably kind. Jingwan inexplicably thought back to before their marriage, or perhaps even before that, when Qin Shufei looked at her strangely. Although it was not too obvious, it was not always like this. There was a trace of inquiry in her gaze, but it was 100%. Qin Shufei treated Lu Qingdi's children about the same. It could be said that she truly treated them equally. Although she secretly stood on Li Hongyuan's side, she seemed to think highly of Li Hongyuan's ability. She did not consider herself as an elder, nor did she criticize Li Hongyuan's actions. Thus, Li Hongyuan actually felt Qin Shufei's gaze more than Jingwan. Compared to Jingwan, Li Hongyuan was indifferent. He continued to walk forward unhurriedly. Jingwan followed closely by his side, half a step behind. The two stood at an appropriate position. Greetings, Imperial Concubine Shu. Qin Shufei seemed to have been suddenly awakened. She revealed the same gentle smile as usual. However, compared to the distance between them previously, it was obvious that they were much closer now. Quickly dispense with the formalities. Prepare a seat for Jin Wang and Jin Wang Fei. The palace maid quickly moved a chair over, served tea, and then retreated. Only the three of them were left. Li Honyuan did not take a seat. Jingwan also stood. Li Honyuan looked straight at Qin Shufei. Speaking of which, she was a Shu Mu Fei. Li Hongyuan's actions were definitely rude. She had never seen him do such a thing before. Wan, you go out first. I have a few words to say to Imperial Concubine Shu. Li Honyuan suddenly turned his head to Jingwan and said. Jingwan was surprised. She raised her head to look at him. His face was expressionless. His eyes were deep. He hid all his emotions. Even the most powerful psychologist or expert on microexpressions would not be able to see any of his current thoughts. Li Hongyuan's situation was not common, but Jingwan had seen it before. It was just that every time this happened, things might be slightly different. All right, Jingwan smiled lightly. She crouched down and retreated a few steps before turning to leave. Although she had retreated outside, she could still clearly see the situation inside. It was still the same principle. Avoiding suspicion was a must. Li Hongyuan's gaze landed on Qin Shufei's face. Imperial Concubine Shu seems very nervous. Qin Shufei admitted that she was indeed nervous when Li Honyuan suddenly sent Jingwan away. This was because she wasn't sure if Li Honyuan had discovered something. She tried her best to hide it, but in the end, it did not escape his eyes. However, just based on this point, it was more comforting. She also relaxed a bit. But I don't know what this consort has to be nervous about. Li Honyuan finally sat down. You'll have to ask Imperial Concubine Shu yourself. If you really want this prince to say it clearly, then just say it. Who are you? Qin Shufei only felt her heart beating wildly. Her blood flowed faster, causing a trace of color to appear on her face. Her hands unconsciously clenched into fists. Li Honyuan looked at her without batting an eyelid. A look of as expected flashed across his eyes. In reality, he wasn't sure. It was more of a probing factor. This consort doesn't understand what your highness is saying. Qin Shufei's voice trembled slightly. You want to see this prince, but you can't bear to be straightforward. Then there's nothing more to say. This prince will take his leave. Li Hanyuan said, and was about to get up. Yuan or Qin Shufei couldn't take it anymore. She broke down in an instant. Tears rolled down her cheeks. The love and affection in her eyes could no longer be hidden. Li Hongyuan's expression was solemn. He frowned slightly. This situation was also unexpected. Don't cry. You know best what your current situation is. Yuana, I'm... The rest of her words were stuck in her throat. It seemed like she couldn't spit them out because she was afraid. It's so obvious. What else do you not know? After figuring out the cause of the matter, Li Hongyuan regained his tranquil composure. She knew that he didn't have any feelings for her. She was already mentally prepared, but when she really faced it, her heart still felt like it was being stabbed by a knife. Especially when she thought of the mother-son relationship between him and noble consort Su. It was so painful that she almost suffocated. This was clearly her son. He was growing up in her womb. The first thing she felt was him stretching his arms and kicking in her womb. However, she wasn't able to see him being born, let alone participate in his growth. In reality, she had never complained. Even when she was abandoned by her family, she was only sad. She accepted a fate that she couldn't fight against because she believed that she would live her own life. That man, who was her husband, misunderstood her, hurt her, and even killed her. She didn't feel anything. Instead, it was a kind of relief. Anyway, there were no feelings. He didn't believe her, and she didn't want to explain too much. This man was stubborn. It was as if he had completely closed himself off. It was useless to say anything. Only this child, only him. However, it was gratifying that he didn't suspect her. He didn't think that she was a demon or a ghost, and he was afraid of her. Yuan, you believe me, right? Noble consort Shu died last night. Did you take over her body? Li Hanyuan didn't answer the question. That's not the case. I've been in Sister Qin's body for many years. It's just that I was too weak and slept in her body most of the time. This accident, I temporarily took control of the body. Many years? How many years? https:///11/11/11807/8699-772. HTML. www.bicken. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.